All right, here we go. We're live.
Hey,
Steve?
world.
Yeah, so how long do you want to chat today while we have a bunch of people sitting in the green room?
I'm thinking 3 hours. Then we'll bring them in.
We'll see what their patience is like. Really test these people because, you know, it's all about you and I, right?
How much more Project Hail Mary discussion shall we do?
Exactly. All right. We got a big, I mean, the people, we started a little earlier. We had to stop them from talking so that we could do the open. So here we go. This is a huge show. So much fun. I'm so excited to have everybody here. You ready to do this, Steve?
Let's do it. Let's
do it.
We are Brightside. Dear.
Hey, home theaters. Nah, we're not going to do that today. This is shoot. We're going to be formal and reserved and professional, right, Steve?
This is shoot.
You could have warned me.
Reserved and professional, right? This is shoot.
You could have warned me.
Professional, right?
What is going on? I'm hearing something back. Did you hear that?
I did.
I don't know what that was.
Somebody must have a window open with.
Yeah, somebody had some. It's not happening now, though, right?
No, it's fine now.
Okay.
We're all good.
Wow, that was weird.
I was getting deja vu.
We thought we worked out all the bugs, and here we are. Oh yeah, there we go. So, all right. This is the show about, you know, what are the real factors that shape image quality? That's what the title is. And again, we talked about it earlier this week. John and I have been talking about this. John Thompson, that is in the panel. We have Joel Silva from ISF, Jon Thompson, Hollywood producer, Joe Kluznick, integrator, AV Rant, Andre Floyd from Kaleidescape. I know you, Andre. You got a new title now, but I know you like head engineer or something, right?
No, I'm just director of marketing, technical marketing.
Oh, okay. I've known you a while. You're changing titles. So yeah, John, like I said, Jon Thompson and I have been talking for a while, years about and debating with people and amongst ourselves. He's educated me a lot about this, about the quality of image, what makes up the quality, and how this, like, what all that means. And we have literally gotten to the point now in home theater that, you know, this is really about, you know, quality over quantity when it comes to pixels on the screen. So is 2K better than 4K and vice versa? And by the end of this, hopefully we've answered a lot of those questions and given a lot of objective information so you are better armed to make better decisions on your displays, how to calibrate displays, what a good system would be, a display would be. So let's get to it. I'll let everybody go around the room and introduce themselves, say a little bit about themselves. So we'll start with Joel.
Well, greetings all. I'm basically a hobbyist that gave up my day job to try and make a living in video. And we had this dream once upon a time that we'd be able to send people into homes, calibrate TVs to professional standards, international standards, and try and make a go of it. So we walked over to people in the trade shows with instruments and we said, you have got the best TV in the show. Can I put an instrument on it and measure it? And people said, oh, we don't do that. And I said, well, can I just try it? They know, could you leave this booth, please, and take your meter and go away? So I've personally been thrown out of more CES trade shows than anyone you'll ever meet. And we actually met some people behind the scenes who wanted to do it right. And over the years, we were able to take the calibration controls, which were always there, but were buried in the service modes, and bring them out to the consumer mode. And that was a landmark move for us where we didn't have to hack it, because we actually had a hacker's database telling people how to get into the TV sets, find the controls, and avoid the controls that blow up the TV set. So we used to have to either put our hands inside dangerous TVs, try not to get electrocuted, We'll go into digital chassis, try not to blow up the TV. So these for us are golden days where we actually have the controls we need. Remarkably, most of them work. And we've got over 7,000 people over the years we've trained who've become buddies who are out there around the world working with people to get good pictures. And one of the jobs I've had on the side has always been chairing standards committees for CTA and CEDIA. And your timeliness for this particular discussion couldn't be better, because I've got some people working with. Andre Floyd, who's on this call, is one of them. But I do say I've got the best and the brightest people in the business on the committee, studying what we think a recommended practice for building a system design document would be, where I could read the document, from the document decide based upon the room, the budget, what's important. And the outline I can give you right now, the outline starts with the most important factor, which we've determined with the brightest and the best, is dynamic range. The second most important factor is going to be color accuracy and color saturation combined. And the third important factor, not to make it not important, but it's our distant third, resolution. So I'll sit here boldly say, I would rather be watching a 1080p HDR document, movie, whatever, than a 4K SDR. So, and I had that in my own home. I've got a system that brings me 4K SDR, 4K HDR and 2K HDR, and the 2K blows it away, and that's a bandwidth issue. We'll touch on compression and things like that. Mm-hmm. I'm watching a lesser system with 2K, and it blows away the 4K, which gives me a migraine headache to begin with. But you bring compression into it. So one of the things, as much as writing a recommended standards document, by the way, for anybody into audio, the recommended standards document for immersive audio is done. It's RP22. And if you're a CDA member, CTA member, it's available. If not, hack your way into that document and get it. It's the recipe for immersive audio. We're following the immersive video format by copying the format of the document. So these are sister documents. Immersive video design, immersive audio design. The immersive audio design is a must read. It's by the brightest and the best in audio. But let's touch on the video one, because the video one, we've gotten to the point where we've got parameters all lined up, but it's going to follow that same theme. Maximize dynamic range. That'll include the room and the budget and everything else. Within that dynamic range, get the most color volume and color fidelity you can get out of it. And then get the best resolution you can, but that's really a distant third. So forgive me for a long answer, but you asked a really tough question.
All right. There it goes again. Why am I coming through twice? All right. That was Joel. We know where he's coming from.
He's been waiting to say that for
Yes, he has. It's stuff we've been saying, and that's great to have Joel reiterating it and having a professional, and to get that document is going to be awesome. So, but with that, John, I know John. Most of our listeners know John, but John, briefly give us your background for the people that don't already know who you are.
Well, I got involved in this whole thing years ago, thanks to mainly George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and a wonderful cinematographer called Freddie Francis and the late Bob Hoskins, because I did actually the first ever digital film that was ever produced, which was called Rainbow, that Freddie shot and Bob directed, shot in Canada. And then that went on to me working with George and Rick McCallum at Lucasfilm, and we looked at the whole thing. And then that progression then moved into me becoming part of DCI and being involved with creating the DCI standard and understanding what the transition was from analog to digital. And I've been involved ever since. And I work for one of the studios these days, and I look after the technical elements on certain films, as well as the creative sides. I'm moving more into looking after the creative sides, because that's I think the interesting issue. We have a saying that basically, you should be watching the message and not the mechanism. If you can see the mechanism, then there's something gone wrong with the film, because the film's not engaging or captivating you. So if you're suddenly talking about pixels, it means you've lost it. You're not actually engaged in the film anymore. That's what we try to do. We try to make films that actually captivate and engage people. It doesn't matter what resolution they're seeing in. They should be good enough to be watched in any format. But we do.
So, John, are you saying, John, it's all about the experience?
It's all about the experience.
It's all about the experience. And I think we're going to touch on this a little bit later, but it's about getting the viewer immersed in the experience, correct?
A lot of it is marketing. 2K, 4K, 8K. It's like 2K, if it's done properly, is beautiful. I mean, a lot of DCI cinemas are still 2K. And I guarantee if you're watching a good enough film, like Hamlet or something, you're going to sit there and you're going to enjoy it. You're not going to sit there and go, oh, I should have seen that in 4K. You're going to go, that's a great film because it's presented properly.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean,
yeah. Oh, sorry, John.
Sorry.
So I was just saying it's the experience and it's the emotion that is created. Kodak used to have a thing which I think I came up with. I think I came up with, and they Kodak copied it, which is the emotion is in the emulsion. I think I said that in the late 90s, and that's what we try to capture moving forward. We try to then recreate when we did DCI was recreate the emotion in digital, and I think we did a very good job. I mean, we were in a strange, precarious situation because we were sitting between 6 studios who all don't really get on very well and talk to each other. We had to answer to all of them and keep them all happy. And my colleagues, Walt Ordway, Chuck Goldwater, they were incredible. The late Jim Whittlesey, who I have the greatest immense for, who created the whole DCI mastering system, which is still now used. I mean, his protocols are still now used when everyone makes a DCP.
So, John, tell me this. So the emotion is in the emulsion. Was that your short-lived painting and decorating career?
Yes. I was
just
yes.
There we go. All right, okay. Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joe Kluznick. I am a CEDIA certified designer, ESCD. Been doing that for about 20 years now. Have watched the progression from standard definition to high definition to 4K. Been building theaters for systems like that the entire time. And also, you can find me over on the AV Rant podcast as a guest host sometimes, where we answer questions for common users that they write in, and we like to try and dig into those deeply.
All right. And Andre?
Hey there. So I started at Sony Electronics. I spent 28 years there. The first 20 some of those was on the broadcast and production side, managing camera marketing and then eventually projector marketing and launching the first digital cinema projectors. And then I moved into the consumer side in 2012 and managed the home theater cinema business there. And that's where I came to know Gina and some of the people at Kaleidescape, and they eventually invited me to join Kaleidescape. And so I've been here for 7 years and managing the technical marketing, technical support, and things like that. But as in my time at Sony, lived the transition from standard definition to high definition to 4K, and all the iterations in between of compression, going from what John was talking about earlier about 601, digital video, and how to get that down into smaller and smaller pipes. That is what we're looking at today.
Deej, is it just me, or are you kind of feeling underqualified, same as I am?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, I'm here about the experience, and this is okay.
Hey, technically we know nothing, because in this space it's reinventing itself every day.
Yeah.
Every day is like the first day of school.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's that's kind of what this is all about. It's like home theater is constantly evolving. And what we're here to talk about is the evolution of, like, we've been marketed, as you guys were saying earlier, 2K. When 1080 came out, we didn't call it 2K. We called it high def, and it was 1080p. And then they marketed 2K over 4K. And today they've figured out we can't see the difference anymore. It's like going from 4K to 8K. There really isn't as big of a difference anymore. And I mean, we have the graphic for it's the only graphic we have for today, but it's like, it literally is. It's about the perception of these pixels. And Joel, like, with screen size and stuff, in your opinion, just about screen size, like, what's your, like, I don't want to even say opinion, but what's viewing distance mean to resolution and the perceived resolution and all of that? Because I want to get this out of the way right up front, because from here on out, we're going to be talking about, like, the quality part over the quantity part. So start off with, like, just basically the different resolutions and seating distances and stuff.
Well, let's put it in framework. That is the title that we gave our document that I've been living and breathing, and that's the word immersive. And I don't care what you do with your laptop or your phone, it's not going to be an immersive experience. And size is part of it. Contrast is part of it. Color is part of it. But the entire experience gets you to the point where, as John talked, you forget about the hardware. The hardware shouldn't be part of your experience. If the hardware is part of your experience because the subwoofer is rattling or I've got motion artifacts in the picture, I'm out of the experience and I'm into being annoyed. So we want to have a transparent, immersive experience. So does it start with screen size? Absolutely. Without the proper screen size, we don't have immersion. So one of the things we see that's paralyzing so many of my people is the demand for a very large projection screen in a room without good light control, without enough projector to light the screen up to the point where it's bright enough to be immersive. So everything counts. So the room is where we start for system design. And in a bad room with video walls and things now, and very bright projectors and ambient light rejecting screens, I could do a reasonably good job. Can I be as good as a perfectly dark room? No, but that movie theater environment we're looking for is not obtainable for a lot of homes. So we can do many good things in homes that aren't perfect if we have enough screen size, enough light. Now, one of the things that cracks me up all the time is people demanding a huge screen without the budget. And my solution to that is relatively simple. I simply tell people, if you want a bigger screen, move your couch. Move closer. The system will be magically bigger and magically more immersive. So what we're writing as far as the recommended practice is a ratio of screen size to seating. And that determines something very simple called a horizontal field of view. And the initial high definition horizontal field of view limitation on 1080p was 33 degrees. Because after 33 degrees, you started to see pixels and you started to see motion artifacts. And our high-end recommended practice right now is going to go into the mid-50s, 50 plus, 55, 58 degrees horizontal field of view, which is bloody immersive. It's fantastic if you have enough light, if the color is good, if the contrast is good enough, and the resolution doesn't present things that annoy you. So when we're getting into screen size, the room determines where we start. The aspect ratio of the screen is going to be determined by what people watch, because do I put in a 235 screen or 178? The answer is yes. But what do you watch most? Are you movie watching? Are you sports watching? I've got one client who's a gamer. He strictly watches games, and to him, 235 is useless. There aren't enough games for 235. I've got other clients who own sports teams. They just watch sports. They don't want to know about 235. And the bulk of my clients watch both. So we end up putting in masking screens, which is not inexpensive, but it is the solution to match the screen to the content, because the content rules. So if I have a big enough screen and a close enough viewing distance and a room that permits the image to go through, I can get an immersive experience, make people delighted, whether you enjoy the film and forget about the hardware and the software. Just watch the movie. How it's coming to you doesn't matter. Now, that gets into a problem, because when I have an immersive experience and I've got a very good field of view and I'm involved in the movie, all of a sudden the bandwidth that's delivering the content to me becomes an issue, because I'm watching something that the artifacts and the softness get in the way of the picture. So this is the challenge we have nowadays, and we're getting better at compression every day. We're learning more about compression every day. So what was unthinkable to watch a streaming product a few years ago is now moderately unpleasant or pleasant, depending on how it's presented. But getting into a higher bandwidth source, you have more potential for an immersive experience without being forced out of the image by artifacts. So
and we're gonna get into that depth.
But it's a multi-pronged attack. You've got to have enough screen size, enough light, enough clarity, enough color saturation. If all these things come together, I can sit back and enjoy the movie. And that's what it comes down to.
Yep.
I think that one of the things that's interesting about this chart is 4K came about as a study years and years ago about what the capability of the human eye is. And 4K is what the human eye can detect and see the individual pixels at about 3 picture heights from the screen. And so that was part of the DCI decision to make 4K the requirement for digital cinema. And so that's what this chart's kind of giving you that point. If you're in the center of this chart and you've got a 4K TV, depending on how far away you're going to sit, get the right display and it's going to look right.
I mean, the thing is with 4K, we've been doing 4K for years. I mean, there's a film I did years ago called Closer with Mike Nichols, which had Julia Roberts in it and Clive Owen. And that was a back to film. And I insisted that we did all the inserts on that in 4K because of the way it was done. I think it was probably the first time actually a Hollywood film before then had actually had 4K done into it. And it was interesting how there was a lot of reaction as to what was going on there as to whether it was worth it or not, but it actually made a huge difference. And I was very grateful that Mike Nichols actually, backed us and supported us big time for doing that. And it's also on the back of that, we then scanned Alien at 4K, because I think it was one of the first times that a film had been scanned entirely for a re-release at 4K in that kind of thing. But I mean, it was nothing new because all my colleagues who were doing IMAX have been using 4K for years before that, because it was considered to be a ideal resolution for IMAX. But now IMAX is everyone's looking at sort of 18 to 24K because they've suddenly realized what potentially can be derived from it. But it's going back to what you're saying, it's true. The study we did at DCI is that anything beyond 2.5 screen heights back, you couldn't tell the difference. That's the thing. So if you're more than 2.5 screen heights back, you wouldn't tell the difference between 2K and 4K unless you had 50/50 vision, and very few people have 50/50 vision. Most people have less than 20/20 vision. Yeah.
Joe, when you're doing like installations or designs for people and talking about like screen size, what is their perception of this? What is your experience in dealing with people like, okay, this is the size screen you should have? How do you get pushback from people? Do they understand? Do they just want the biggest they can possibly have? How does that go?
So yeah, I think a lot of people who haven't gone through the education process, I want the biggest one I can get. And that's, there's a lot of justification that needs to go into each decision that you make, starting with how many people in your audience, right? Is there going to be 2 of you, 4 of you, 6 of you? How big does that screen need to be? Yes, you want it to be immersive, but an immersive screen for different people depends on how far you're going to sit, what size your room is, all of those factors. And then you get into, well, is a flat panel going to work for you up to 100, 115 inches, or do we need to go 120 and up? And that's really going to necessitate projection, unless you're getting into some of the newer screen walls. So it's trying to figure out from a scientific based standpoint, what do you need for the right tool for the right job, right? How do you figure out what's going to be an immersive experience for that audience in that room?
Well, do you find, Joe? I'm just curious, Joe, with your client base, and Joel, you may well have the same sort of thing. Do you find though that the fact that they are coming to people like you with your experience, your knowledge of this field, that they're already some way down that track to understanding that it's not just by the biggest thing I can find, the loudest system I can get, they're already thinking I need an expert. So they've already got some knowledge, or as opposed to someone just walking into a big box store and just going, oh, give me the biggest TV you can that I can fit into the back of my car.
It varies depending on their level of interest. Are they a hobbyist? Are they someone who's had a theater before? Are they someone who said, I've got an empty room in my house that I want to watch movies in? Are they going to be doing multiple things in that room, right? Is this just a dedicated theater space, or is this a multimedia space? Is it going to be, a pool table, or are you going to play golf simulator in this room? What else are you going to do? So it goes back to finding the right tool for the right job. What is it that they need?
Well, I end up dealing with the public quite a bit, and I can tell you right off the bat, the first time we did a public training, we ended up with an end user knocking on the door and coming in with a check to pay for training. And we asked a simple question, why are you here? He goes, well, I interviewed 4 different people about spending a small fortune, and those 4 different people gave me 5 different answers. So I'm coming here so I can figure out what I should buy and what's the right way to do it. So I have found in the public at large 2 things. 1, confusion with the terminology, confusion with the people not talking to them in a way they can understand. And 2, a drive for knowledge, a quest to figure out what they should do to get the best bang for their buck. And that's what drives people to CEDIA type members. And they get burned out by getting bad information online. And one of the things that's lacking online is one of the things I work with for years, and that's called editors and editing, fact checking, all these things you're not finding out online. So people are getting multiple answers and multiple terms they don't understand for the same question. And if they are going to hire a professional, hopefully they'll get someone who understands recommended practices, someone who's taken training, someone like a friend here, Joe's done multiple systems over the years and can send referrals out. And your referral base is going to be your basis of your business if you're doing installations. And if you have happy clients, they're going to send you more. So building systems for people is very complex, which is why we're spending 2 years writing a document. But it starts with a client discussion, and it starts with the room. And how much control can I have over the room? Can I control the reflections from coffee tables? Can I make the room sound good and look good? And how much can I change in the room? How much will the decorator prohibit me from changing? And how big a screen is the first question we're dealing with? And that's actually shouldn't be the first question. The room is the first question. What can I do in a room to make it hospitable? And from the room decision, I can determine the technology. Can I do a flat panel? Can I do a projector? Am I going to do a video wall? Do I have light control over the blinds? Can I close and open the blinds at will and give light control? So designing the room has everything to do with the room itself. The first decision after you figure out what's going on with the room is the technology. And from there, how do I make it as immersive as the budget permits? Because the bloody budget comes into play, like it or not. And Joe, you're dealing with this all the time. What they want necessarily won't fit the budget they want. And sometimes you have to make compromises. So the whole essence of a recommended practice document is the circular decisions, because you make one decision, it precipitates a change in something else you've done. So this workflow of making things work the best they can within the room limitations, the budget limitations, is what we do for a living.
Yeah, it's all about the trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
What am I going to have to give up to get this other thing?
Yeah, it's interesting on that what you're saying, because the BBC did a study. They commissioned a report. Andy Quested used to be their chief technology officer, likes telling this story. They commissioned this report as to what the size TV that people would have in their homes. And after spending a lot of money, the BBC, they came to the conclusion that most people would actually only have 42-inch televisions in their room. And then they suddenly realized...
John, was that? Can I ask John, just on that, I'm just curious, was that a regional study or a worldwide study?
That was just through the UK. That was just throughout the UK.
Okay.
So I was looking for the UK. The conclusion, originally their conclusion, and they were very happy with their conclusion that everybody's going to have 42 inches. And then suddenly, within about a year of this document being published, they were then trying to shred it as fast as possible, because they suddenly realized actually that people weren't actually interested in only 42-inch television. They were interested in the biggest TV they could get in the room. And people were actually taking windows out to be able to get a TV in the room. And actually, they didn't care. If it was 77 inches, 98 inches, they would go for the biggest screen possible. So the BBC shot themselves slightly in the foot on that one, because they made a lot of their assessment and their whole thing based on that everybody would be having a 42-inch television.
Right. And it used to be 55 inches was the norm. Now 75 inches is the norm, right? And just people aren't really considering a TV smaller than that from a view.
Well, I think
pricing has to do with that. Yeah.
It's starting to creep up even beyond that, because 80-inch televisions now are only about $1,500.
Yeah. So 77 inches is now the new 42.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we go up from there. So our discussions at our committee started with a 77-inch TV at 8 feet away, which gave you that 33-degree field of view. The crime is most people buying a 77-inch TV set are sitting way further back than 8 feet. Right. So the immersive factor is history. So getting something big enough, sitting close enough. Do remember, always focus on the fact that you've got screen size versus viewing distance.
Yes. Yeah, and that field of view is good for one, maybe two people at 77 inches.
At 77 inches, yeah. And that's what we're talking about today. It's like, what's nice is, when I started out, it was like if you could get a 32 or 27-inch television, that was what was considered a home theater display back in the 80s. Now we're literally seeing the average television is perfect for a home. If you're getting the average consumer is getting 77 inches, that's a home theater experience, but we have to move close enough, right? And that's when we get into like what Joel was saying. Okay, I need an immersive experience at 77 inches. And let's be honest, most of the people watching this and listening to this, we're talking about their experience. everybody else in the room is probably doesn't have the knowledge that they have, that built the theater, that designed the theater, that dreamed of having a theater, whatever it is. But let's start at the 77 inches. You need to get close enough to that. And at 77 inches, what we had was, okay, that is probably, you can sit close enough to that with a 2K image. And as we were saying before, if the pixels have high quality, at a 77-inch display, sitting close enough to that, your perception of pixels is gone. And now we're talking about the quality of the image, of each pixel. Now, how does that change? We talked about earlier, like you mentioned, compression. We talked about bit depths. We're going to talk about bit depth and stuff like that. How does that change? And then Joel, I know we don't really need to go over 444, 422, and 420, but we can, for everybody else, like how does that all change? How do we get a better quality image within that fixed resolution?
Well, you mentioned the 420 and the rest. Let's take that apart for a bit. We've got basically in the human eye 2 different modes of vision. We have sensory organs that focus on luminance and sensory organs that focus on color. And that was the essence beyond the old 601 landmark document from the 80s that determined that we could take the signal apart into a luminance signal and a chroma signal, and we could compress the chroma significantly more because most people's eyes would not catch it. So if you're talking about the 420, 444, the 4 is always the luminance signal, and we compress that less. If it's 420 or 411 or 422, it's dickering with the color compression, which is really what we talk about compression. It's color compression. We compress the color significantly more because we get away with it. Would we rather have 444 delivered right to the home at full bandwidth? It's impossible. The bandwidth is too huge. It's terabytes, and we've got to compress it down. So taking it apart into luminance and chroma works for people, and we get away with more compression, and at a certain point, you don't get away with the compression. And that's the fine line we've been playing for years. How much can I compress it so I can afford to send you 500 channels over a cable system and not have people bitch at me that it looks terrible? And then you've got high-end solutions that compress less, that give you premium products at more money and less convenience. And that's the nature of our game. How much are you willing to pay for your content? And if your screen is big enough and it's immersive, you need to pay more because you've got to feed it high-test fuel. So the whole compression gig started with the birth of digital. And we'll talk about the 601 document later on, but that was the landmark document for digital video, and we have followed that format ever since. So
just to sum it up, what you're talking about there is basically 444 means if you've got 4K, you've got 4K color, 4K resolution, luminance resolution. If you've got 422, you have 4K luminance, and you only have half resolution horizontally color. If you have 420, which is why I don't like 420, which is why I'm a big fan of Dolby Vision cinema standard on Blu-ray on 4K disc, is effectively you have 4K luminance and HD color. So most people, if you're watching a standard 4K disc, you're actually only watching HD color. So you've cut the color down by a quarter. So you've got full 4K luminance and only HD color.
Well, you actually cut the color by 3/4. You're only left with 1/4.
It's horizontally vertically cut, so it's like a quarter. So you have quarter resolution.
And we get away with it. People like it because the luminance is preserved. And we don't have the privilege. We're not worthy of seeing 444. We don't get 422. We're going to get a lesser format because that's how we deliver the content. And from there, the two miracles that have really happened, the improvements in compression, and more importantly, and Andre can speak with this with his days at Sony. Andre, how much better over the years did the video processing get in your products to take a signal that's compressed terribly and make it look presentable in real-time video processing inside the TV? And Sony was a leader in that. Could you give us a couple of hints as to how that progressed over the years?
Well, as the methods of distributing TV started to get spread out, so when they took digital TV and took what was a full bandwidth channel and cut it into 6 different smaller bandwidth channels, you had to be able to fit that video down a smaller pipe. And so the video became more and more compromised. And so, you can even still see that today with different broadcasts, depending on which network you're watching football on. Some of it's sharper than others just because they're using more bandwidth for their particular transmission. And so because the signal was getting worse, the TVs needed to get better. And that's why when you right now look at a good TV and you compare a bad, a limited streaming signal with a high bandwidth disc signal, they don't look that different picture-wise because the TV is so good at fixing the compromised parts of the image.
And actually, you're making up parts of the picture as you go along. That 420, you're taking 1/4 strength color, restoring it to full strength color with what we generally call your spatial and temporal interpolation, which is a fancy word for guesswork. I'm guessing what it should look like with the adjacent pixels. Okay, but if we call it spatial and temporal interpolation, it's better. And just as an aside, I've recently put a video processor into my system, which was god-awful expensive, but it did a better job, again, at processing. It did a better job of motion artifacts, and it did a much better job at tone mapping. So as much as I have a high-end projector with a really good video processing engine inside of it, I deployed an auxiliary video processing engine to take it a step further, because not all the content I watch is perfect. And that imperfect content requires fantastic processing to make it look good on a large screen. So this is the two-pronged approach. As the content has gotten more compressed, on the consumer side, we can be better at restoring it.
But coming back to this is why I'm a big fan of Dolby Vision, full enhancement Dolby Vision, because it has all the metadata to restore it back to 422 properly. Which also, Kaleidescape is also, because that uses Profile 5 version, which is also the same version that was developed for Disney Plus. Because the Kaleidescape and Disney Plus use the same version of Dolby Vision. They're the only two people who actually do. Everybody else doesn't use it because they're not allowed to license it because Disney paid for it. Which gives you the ability to go back to full 422 properly. Gives you the best picture. If you've got a decent TV with Dolby with Disney Plus in there, you'll find the Dolby Vision version there vastly superior because it's giving you proper 422 back into the processing system. So you don't need external processing to fix it because you actually have it there in the first place.
So
that's the
with what's that?
That's the thing. That's why I've always been a big fan, and nobody seems to understand this. It's like why I like, because there's two versions of, well, certainly on disc, there's two versions of Dolby Vision. There's the standard version, which I call the TV version, which was designed for encoding TV shows at 420, 10 bits, and then there's the full enhancement version, which is actually 12 bits at 422, which was what they did. Dolby were very clever, and they listened to what we were saying because they took the mezzanine master, which is a 444. 4K version, and it's like, well, how do we do the best job of that? Well, okay, they couldn't go back to 444, but they went back to 422 at 12 bits. Because 12 bits was defined as the minimum dynamic range you need to get a decent picture of a cinematic quality, not TV, but cinematic quality.
Yeah. Guys, can I just very quickly, the thing we talked about prior to the show starting has happened, so I'm going to have to go, guys. So I will love you and leave you, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. Okay.
A lawyer's job is never done.
Thanks, Steve. Talk to you later,
thanks,
buddy.
guys. You will do. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
All right. So with that, though, with the Dolby Vision, with all of the 10-bit, 12-bit that you were just talking about, how does that, John, like, the bit depth affect all of that? Like, what we perceive?
It gives you a more smooth tonal range, and it gives you much more to work with. You've got 4,096 steps instead of 1,024. 10-bit is old. I mean, Sony's Digi-Betacam was 10-bit. I mean, that was from the early 90s. So it's like we've moved on dramatically from that. I mean, when we did the DCI tests, Jim Whittlesey and I were sitting in the Pacific Theatre on Hollywood Boulevard, and we went through a whole load of prints to look what we could sell, and we defined that actually the minimum spec to reproduce a release print, not a show print, a release print, was around about 12 bits, and that was defined as a minimum, which is why the DCI spec is 12 bits minimum, because that's where we came to. Ideally, we'd like it actually more to be 16 bits, which is what we use in post production. But you know, the thing is, what is actually fascinating about that is that TI, with their lovely, wonderful processing in there, projectors since then has moved forward massively. It's now working at 32-bit float in their projectors, and you can get almost close to 24 bits at the certain points if you have the 24-bit frame rate on the latest Dolby Cinema projectors. It's
Okay.
You know, it's going beyond anything that's anybody really ever needs.
Right.
But then the other day, Windows announced that, as far as they're concerned, the latest frame rates that Windows will support is 5,000 hertz. So who's going to need 5,000 hertz?
So with everything you just said there, right? Kind of like I get it, I understand it, but it like, to wrap my head around it, like what I'd like to simplify it to this, and I'd like to get you guys' comment on this. You said 10-bit is old, right?
Yeah. 12-bit
is better, and you and I have talked about that actually about a month ago on the show. We talked about 12-bit is better, more information. But you're running at 16 in the studio, right?
Yeah.
How long? Now, this is what and here's where I think what this is all about today is that 2K, 4K, it's not about that. We've established that, right? It's like you can have, if you're running a 12-bit in a 2K image, if everything is, you have the quality, it's going to look amazing. How long in the future, how long before we're saying 12-bit is old and we can potentially get to 16-bit? Because that's what this is all about. It's not about the amount of pixels. It's about the quality of them. And that's what you're saying with the 10-bit to 12-bit, 16-bit. It's the compression.
We moved away from that years ago. When we started doing digital cinema, we started off by being what is known as XYZ color space, which is actually no color. It's everything, absolutely everything. And then that got defined by our friends at the Academy called ACES. So in post-production, we use a system called ACES, which is actually effectively bit depth independent and color space independent. It can be anything. So we can actually take our master and we can output it at whatever bit depth is required and whatever color space is required for the consumer version. Now, as processing becomes better in the consumer space, I'm assuming that at some point somebody's going to come up with some kind of virtual codec that actually encompasses everything. So it's not 422, 420, Rec 2020. It'll be some kind of absolute where you can just effectively send an absolute, and it'll then be device dependent as opposed to, which is what Dolby Vision is very similar to that, because the Dolby Vision color space is actually wider than Rec 2020. And that's the whole thing. Is you should be able to master it in a format that actually becomes device independent. So therefore, when you watch it, it's only as good as the device you're watching it on, and that's actually be quite useful for manufacturers, because then it gives them some differentiation.
No, they like that.
Yeah, we're in a situation at the moment where home cinema hasn't moved forward in 5 years, 6 years. It just sat there. I mean, what was the last major HDR in 2015 was probably the last thing, and then Dolby Vision coming out in 2017, 2018. That's probably the last time anything really moved forward. I mean, the biggest revolution recently was Trinoff's processor being able to play DCI digital cinema Atmos. I mean, that's that to me is not an evolution. That's just some very rich things only have to buy one processor now.
Yeah, DJ, but speaking touch on something for a moment, DJ.
Say that again.
We touch on something for a moment because we're talking a lot about bit depth. I don't know what you've had in discussions in the past, but the thing that actually accounts for my immersion here is, what do I see on screen when I go from 10 to 12?
Yeah.
What artifacts get less obnoxious when I go from 8 to 10 to 12? Because we're not talking about resolution here. We're talking about artifacts. And when I have more bit depth, I have smoother pictures. And John talks about Dolby quite a bit, but let's give some background here. The whole HDR thing is actually well over 20 years old. It started with a book in the Netherlands about the perception.
Should I do a little sounder?
Yeah, it goes way back. That book was studied by a bunch of people. We're going to be picked up by the Applied Physics Lab at a university in British Columbia. And they actually built in their lab a very bright TV with good dynamic range, and they actually called it high dynamic range. They built a TV. It got taken over by a company called Brightside, who couldn't figure out what to do with it, but they're thinking geophysics, they're thinking manufacturing, they're thinking possibly post-production. And about circa 2007, Dolby, being a curious bunch, buys the whole shooting match from Brightside, brings in the people from the University of British Columbia. So when John talks about them doing it differently, they were part of the birth of HDR coming into the consumer space. And they showed it to a number of people, myself being lucky enough to see it and unlucky enough to see it, because the first time I looked at it, I said, I don't want to see this anymore. I don't want to see it until I can have it in my home, because this is absolutely another generation. When they showed it to a bunch of SMPTE people, it became SMPTE 208.4. It actually became a production standard, which changed the world. And it all came out of the book and the British Columbia and Dolby jumping in. So they've got a massive amount of experience in the birth of all this. So the delivery of it shows their background here. But at the end of the day, when we go up in bit depth and I'm looking at a sky with clouds, and I've got false contouring in the clouds that I don't really see until I see a picture without it. And then that artifact is gone. And some of the things we took for granted in TV that were just rough to look at become pleasant to look at it. And the better bit depth gives us better pixels. If you want to talk about better pixels, yes, your bit depth gives you better pixels, because as I go from transitions, they get smoother and I get less removed from the immersion when I don't see artifacts. So that's where the rubber hits the road.
So is that where flaws happen? So like the more information, you just touched on something that like actually rang for me. Like, it's the transition when the pixel is changing. So these pixels can only hold a color at a time, right? So each square on your screen holds a particular color. You can't split that square in half. You can't change the color. Like half that pixel can't be one thing or another. It's like, that's what makes up our image, is all of these pixels, all of these little squares. It's in the information, it's in the transition, is what you just said, Joel, is that...
Let's go pixel to pixel. Let's not talk about pixel. Let's talk about the adjacent pixels.
I'm trying to simplify it from my brain.
Well,
so like,
DJ,
so
if
like,
you think about it, so your display has X number of pixels. No matter what, the display has, 3840 by 2160 pixels. Those pixels are there no matter what. So the question is, what are you putting onto those pixels? Are you putting 3840 by 2160 worth of information, detail, and color, or are you putting 8 million pixels of detail and 2 million pixels of color? So that means that you're compromising a bunch of those pixels.
Right.
Hey, DJ, let me put it this way. If you think about it from a printing standpoint, something that's 300 dots per inch, when it's this far away, no problem. But if it's way up on a billboard, you don't have to be that. If it's going to be really close to you, you might have to go to 600 dots per inch. And the more bit depth you have, the smaller those dots can be.
Right. We've all experienced, like, you've been at a stadium, right? And you look at the Jumbotron, and if you're sitting right in front of it, you're like, they're literally bulbs. They're huge bulbs, right? And it looks stupid. But if you're at the other end of the stadium, it looks like a high-def television, right? So I get that part. But this is what I'm saying, is like when you're sitting right next to that Jumbotron and it's a giant floodlight bulb, that bulb can only hold one color at a time, right? That's your pixel. What Joel just said is, and that like triggered me. I was like, that's where I can understand the flaws come in. When that bulb changes, the more information it has, the smoother the changes that one pixel is going to make. And if all of your pixels aren't doing a good job,
you could, DJ, don't confuse resolution with bit depth here.
No, I'm not. I'm simplifying. I'm not. I'm trying to say, like, I'm not getting into resolution. I'm trying to get to the quality of each pixel.
So let's talk about the adjacent pixels. Let's talk about 20 pixels in a row.
Yep.
Each of which are presenting a different shade of a cloud up on the screen.
Yep.
If I've got 4,000 transitions versus 1,000 transitions, I can be smooth instead of artifact-ridden chunky. I can make smooth transitions with more bit depth. It's the same number of transitions. I haven't changed the resolution.
Okay.
But from pixel to pixel, as you march down the slide of pixels, whether horizontal or vertically, those smooth transitions from a higher bit depth give you a presentable picture instead of an artifact-ridden picture. So part of the key to immersion is indeed high bit depth. And it doesn't change whether you go from 1080p to 4K, because if I'm not seeing the pixels, the transitions between the pixels are far more important than the number of pixels. And that smoothness in the clouds and that smoothness in sand If I'm watching Dune and I'm looking at the actual sand and I'm looking at stripes in the sand that don't belong there versus a presentation that looks like sand, those stripes are an artifact of low bit depth. And the fact that we can't get 16-bit to our homes for a very long time, if ever, is reality. But when I go from 10 to 12, John, would you agree 10 to 12 for the consumer is a huge increase in quality?
It's a huge leap. Yeah, it's a leap into the cinematic space. I mean, that's why I'm pushing everybody to release their stuff in 12 bits rather than, pretending and, because why would you want to buy it again? I mean, it's such a
right.
You have a decent projector. What's that gonna? Yeah, you buy the media. You don't have to buy it again. You're going to upgrade your systems. You're going to upgrade your whatever you're watching it on, and that's going to evolve over time because that's the natural progression of these things. I mean, at the moment, if you want to watch 12 bits in the home, the best thing is to get a Barco Freya projector because that's runs very nicely at 12 bits. But it's also a very expensive projector. Some of the all the way down the range, they can still do 12 bits. But at the moment, there's no consumer televisions that actually do 12 bits. But funnily enough, feeding them 12-bit 422 gives you a nicer picture when how it turns it into 10-bit for the display. Because you have to remember, a lot of these displays are analog. OLED is an analog technology. Very few technologies are actually digital. OLED's analog. Most people have got Sony projectors, SXRD. SXRD is an analog technology. I mean, the only digital technology is actually DLP. DLP is the only digital display technology around.
All right. Now, so we've kind of established that. We did establish that resolution is more about seating distance, right? Because if that's where that becomes important. Once you've established your seating distance, you can.
When we master films, DJ, we usually 1.5 screen heights back because that's where we decide the optimum position is for mastering. 1.5 screen heights back.
Right. So then that's when resolution comes into play. If you're going to sit a certain distance away, you should be, in my opinion, tell me if I'm wrong, you should be trying to get the lowest resolution you can get, because then you're going to get, meaning like if you can get away with a 1080, it's going to take less information. You're going to have better quality, or you could potentially have that. I think, and I want to put this question to everybody. Wouldn't we be better at 10, like especially broadcast with over cable, going 1080 HDR, because the less pixels means you have to compress less because there's less pixels to compress?
I'm sorry, that ship has sailed. That decision could have been made 10 years ago, and there were a whole bunch of people at HBN. We would have had a better solution, but the world has gone 4K.
Right.
So you're going to deal with it. Let's go back to what you talked about with that 1.5 screen height that John talked about, because that's a common design for me. 1.5 screen heights is immersive, plain and simple. You start from there. That's an immersive picture. From that immersive picture, you better not be 720p because you're going to see it. No. But at 1.5 and 1080p, you're going to get away with it. Mm-hmm. The display is going to not have visible pixels of 1.5. And that we established back with the old ITU research. The 1.5 at 1080p is acceptable. Okay, 4K makes it better, but it's not dramatically different. You're not going to see a huge difference, but you will see a big difference if your dynamic range is better, if your color saturation is better, if your bit depth is better. So 1.5 screen heights, you better be good. You better have a good signal, signal processing.
So let's touch on that then. What is the difference for everybody, Joel and John? You can touch on this. What do we get from HDR that we don't get from SDR?
Let's start with dynamic range, the first thing. Okay, you're talking a theoretical system that was based on 100 nits, which was the light output of a tube, which was ruling our world for the vast majority of the century of television. Things were mastered at 100 nits. Consumers went beyond that. Now, the theoretical Dolby style limit of HDR is 10,000 nits. But even if you're dealing with 1,000 nit content, it's still 10 times more dynamic. And the noise floor of the CRT was the noise floor that we put together for the old system, where the noise floor of HDR is far lower. And you're talking a magnitude of blacker and a magnitude of whiter. So you're talking far dynamic range. And right off the bat, I'd rather watch anything in HDR than anything in SDR, simply for dynamic range. Now, on top of that, we're changing the color gamut. We're throwing more colors in. We went from 709, which was based on a tube. It's the best we could do in 1990 with the CRT. Jumping into flat panels and laser technologies, P3 was a huge leap forward, and that's where digital cinema came in. And we've been catching up with that ever since. So going into P3 color versus 709 is a huge leap. So take the dynamic range, take the better color, throw better bit depth into it. I don't care about the resolution. Give you all of the above. I don't care if it's 4K or 2K. Give me the HDR dynamic range. Give me the color gamut and the color volume. Give me the bit depth. I'm a happy guy at 1.5 screen heights. Where in SDR at 1.5 screen heights, it's unwatchable.
I mean, also just to put it in perspective there, nothing is actually shot in HDR. That's a myth.
Yes.
It's a total and utter myth. What you do, you shoot it in what is known as wide dynamic range, and then the colorist will actually spend a lot of time actually turning it into HDR, and that's where the HDR comes from. So it's literally within the refines of post-production. You sit there making the HDR in post-production. It's very artificial. If it's done beautifully, some really good colorists can do some incredible jobs, and HDR will look very natural. Bad colorists will make it look very obvious. Most colorists now are actually getting very good, but I mean, most people now. Originally, 10,000 nits was the thing. 4,000 nits was the standard that everybody was aiming towards. Now everybody masters within 1,000 nits. Nobody's really going up beyond 1,000 nits. They're using a 1,000 nit container because it's the most obvious, and most filmmakers actually object to actually really high dynamic range images because they're quite painful to watch. They get a lot of fatigue. I remember the first time when I saw a proper high dynamic 4,000 nit image in about 2003 or 4 or whatever it was, and I was like, okay, but after about 20 minutes I had a searing headache because no one knew how to use it properly. I mean, it's interesting, the guys you're talking about who at Brightside, we gave them an honorary Oscar. Well, not an honorary Oscar, a scientific Oscar 2 years ago.
Well deserved. They were part of the birth of all this.
But what was interesting is they sold their system to Dolby, and then they went away and thought, how do we make it better? And then they reinvented it and called it light steering, and then sold it to Barco. So it's the same guys who sold the same system twice.
Well, at least somebody's doing something good with the name Brightside.
These are bright guys. These are bright guys. No pun intended.
Yeah. So, all right. So with that, with HDR, it's like, so I've said that. Can you guys comment on like the idea of because I want to get into tone mapping and like, so we have, you know, HDR versus SDR, and as Joel alluded to, and it's 10 times the gradation, if you will, of the dynamic range, right? Yeah. So you have your darkest dark and your brightest bright on the screen, and SDR is 10 times less. So say instead of broken into 100 scale, it's broken into 1,000 scale. Okay, for HDR. Tone mapping. Andre, how does that affect, like, how does tone mapping and stuff affect that in our perception, with our perception of our displays?
So tone mapping is the way that you take what John creates with a lot of detail and a lot of color and a lot of brightness and fit it into a TV that has less color and maybe less pixels and probably less brightness. And so tone mapping is basically a mathematical conversion to say this given pixel that was created at this brightness level at this particular color, how does that get represented on a TV that has less capability? And so the tone mapping is just that transformation that the TV has to do to get it to make all the colors relatively appropriate on your display in your home.
Andre, what are the two basic approaches you could do with tone mapping? You could just clip the image and make it darker, or you could compress things. And your Sony TVs actually made those decisions on the fly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you're remapping it. You're mathematically remapping it. There is a whole series.
That's another way. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's,
this is why, for example, we all now only master at 1,000 nits because the tone mapping of 4,000 nits was a disaster. It didn't look very good because most TVs now can achieve roughly around about 1,000 nits peak. So that was considered to be, the way forward. Roger Deakins, for example, when he did Blade Runner 2049, he mastered it well under 300 nits because he just thought that every TV would destroy it. So he wanted it to be seen properly. So he did it roughly, I think, 280 nits.
So if you look at, people on it, those of us here are old enough to remember what CRT TV looked like back in the day, that when you looked at an image of a car driving down a road in the middle of the day, the sky was going to be white because the TV didn't have the ability to show a black car with wheels and any detail of the driver at the same time as the sky and clouds up in the sky. And so that had to get clipped. And so that's what I think what Joel's referring to. So that's the first thing you do is just say, we're not going to show some of that picture, either not show the dark area or not show the bright area. And the lights in my room are going crazy. And
we need a tone map, Andre.
Live tone mapping.
Yeah. And then, but so the other option is to do this mathematical transform where you say that we know what the brightness capability of the display is. We know what the brightness of the content is. And we're just going to now make everything fit into what the display can do and have it all relatively appropriate based on a curve called the PQ 2084 curve.
Okay. So, and I have a little bit of, I'm a little bit familiar with that, in that the more powerful the processor for the tone mapping, so like the better tone mapping you're going to get. Because for instance, like if it, like John's saying, so if they master it at 1,000, but you're running a projector system that can only do 100 nits, if you have a powerful processor, it's going to take that, it's going to do the math and say, okay, everything at 1,000 is going to, that's your 100 nits coming out of your projector. Everything at 0, that's your black level, and it tone maps, so you're not missing anything in there, but it's tone mapping it from 100 to 0. And you're getting all the detail. And to your point, Andre, like you're getting the sky and the black car at the same time, because each pixel has now been mastered. Where you get it now, if the processor isn't as powerful, it may not do it as well. And what it'll scale it, from what I understand. So instead of getting every pixel, it'll do from 100 to 0, but it'll do it in a scale of like 60 or something. You know what I mean? It changes it. The
other thing that's a difference that's important is the time factor also. So that if you're going to watch a program that only has one scene in it, you know what the average brightness of that scene is and what the peak brightness of that scene is. The problem is that movies have multiple scenes in them with different amounts of brightness. And so that's what is the difference originally with Dolby Vision versus straight HDR10, is that HDR10 says this is what the average brightness of this movie is, and this is what the peak brightness is. We're going to tone map everything in there. What Dolby Vision allows you to do is on a scene by scene basis, say, I know this scene, the peak brightness is here. So if you have, a night, like the space scene in Gravity, you've got a person in the middle of a very dark field with some very bright lights on them. And so you want to be able to represent the brightness of that light extremely bright, but you don't want to make all the black area gray. So you want to be able to adjust that tone mapping down so that it covers that at that point. But then you move to another scene, your interior, and everything is bright. So now you want to be able to do all that relatively appropriately as well. So that's what a really good processor can do, is can do that in real time. So Dolby Vision provided the metadata to allow any display that had that capability to know, here's what the scene is supposed to be tone mapped between. What TVs that have really good processing don't necessarily need that metadata. They're analyzing the incoming image on a scene by scene or frame by frame basis, making that decision and doing that tone mapping on the fly. And so that's the benefit of a higher end TV, higher end projector. They can do that processing real time and make the picture look as good as possible.
I mean, what you're talking here is the difference between tone mapping and dynamic tone mapping. Dynamic tone mapping is where it analyzes the scene, I mean, technically, when they came up with HDR10, which was a complete abomination because that was caused by Samsung throwing their toys out the pram, they ended up with a system where it had no dynamic metadata. So it just had a static tone mapping value, which was then applied arbitrarily across the thing. Now, what you're talking about now is dynamic tone mapping. Now, the difference is there, when you do dynamic tone mapping, even though the math sort of work, you have to then, when you create the mathematics, you have to visually, perceptually fine tune it because the mathematics don't actually work and they'll give you quite a flat picture. So you have to literally, when you create the dynamic tone mapping for the system, you have to tune it yourself by eye, or the person who's writing the code for it has to tune it by eye to be able to look perceptually very, very good, because otherwise you have a very flat image, which is why what you're saying, Dolby is far better, because Dolby actually provides you with the dynamic tone mapping information in the metadata, which gives you a very accurate image. I'm just trying to think, because the system they use, because everybody uses, I'm trying to remember, it's the Hungarian guys who developed it. And everybody uses the same software for creating that dynamic metadata. And I'm trying to think what the guys are called now, but they're really nice guys. They created the grading system Luster years ago, and then they've moved on to creating a whole load of post-production tools. They worked very closely with Peter Doyle on The Matrix when they created the whole system for the grading system for The Matrix. So that was a sort of hierarchical lineage of where these guys came from, that they really knew what pictures looked like because they'd done some very big films, Lord of the Rings. So they then created this whole post-production workflow process, which creates it. I'm trying to think of the name of the company that they use, but they're really nice Hungarian guys. But that's the difference between the system. It's like static, dynamic, and Dolby Vision. And effectively, the other two weren't ever needed, because originally Dolby Vision was the default standard, but unfortunately our friends at Samsung threw the toys out the pram and said we're not going to pay any royalties for it. And made them take Dolby Vision apart and actually turn it into HDR10, which was all the royalty-free parts. So actually, we wouldn't be having this discussion if a certain manufacturer hadn't decided to not want to pay $1 per TV.
Well, $1 per TV is a lot of money these days. People will move the country. They'll move the country they build the TV in for $1 TV. But let's go back to tone mapping in general. Blanket statement: the only good tone mapping is no tone mapping. Just follow the P curve that was created in. And if I've got 1,000 nit content and my home system is only 300 nits, I'm forced to tone map. And Andre talked about the two different methods. In lieu of having the Dolby Vision metadata, what the processor does is make an intelligent decision based upon analyzing the scene between clipping the whites and just making it dark, or modifying the entire map, which could make the whole scene dark. And a lot of guesswork involved trying to get back to the original content's PQ curve. And this has gotten dramatically better over the last few years, because TVs now often do 1,000 nits, and the processing on projectors, because I don't have a system with projection that does 1,000 nits, nor can I, because I've got limited dynamic range. If I make the screen bright enough at 1,000 nits, my blacks are going to be so elevated they'll be gray. So at 300 nits, I can have reasonably good blacks, reasonably good whites, but I have to tone map. So as you get bigger and more immersive, your need for processing becomes dire, and you don't have at the moment right now. Andre, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if a projector that actually takes the Dolby Vision metadata and does the processing in a projector.
There are a couple of kind of lower end ones that do, but it's just technically not possible to do, because to do tone mapping, you have to know how bright the image the display system can be. And the projector doesn't know how big the screen is that it's pointed at.
So it's an impossible task. So you're doing real-time analysis. And again, as you get big enough to be immersive, everything counts. Your luminance counts, your black love in your room counts, your processing really makes a big difference here. And that's where our TVs have gotten dramatically better. And they've also gotten brighter, which means you're doing less tone mapping. So we could spend the entire time talking about tone mapping as an issue, but let's just say it's less necessary and it's gotten better.
Going back to the quality of pixels is interesting, because in the early days we used to master on a thing which Dolby made, a screen called the Pulsar. The Pulsar was a grading monitor, and it could do 4,000 nits. It could burn your retinas out. Now, the interesting thing about the Pulsar, it was brilliant for mastering on, but it was only 1080p. So you'd have to feed it an image that was downscaled. If you did 4K, you'd have to downscale it to 1080p to be able to grade on it. But you were being able to look at 4,000 nits. It looked beautiful. It was. They're all retired now. Dolby've had them all back. I mean, literally, to make it work, because it uses so much power, it had 4 power leads. You had to plug 4 power leads in because it had 4 power supplies to drive the screen. It was a beast of a unit, but that's what originally we used to master on the pulsars. But now that Sony have come out with monitors that can do 4K at roughly 4,000 nits peak on a 10% window, then they've retired all the screens. So, but that was the thing, that if I guarantee if anybody watched anything on the pulsar, you'd be blown away, and you wouldn't care whether it was 4K, 8K, or whatever. You just be, that looks amazing at 4,000 nits.
Yeah, John, I saw it in pre-production. It wasn't actually pre-production. It was more the soldering gun and slide rule and hacksaw days. And it was terrible to watch because it ruined you. You looked at it and you just said, I'm done. And the first thing it showed us was this universal picture with the globe spinning against a black background and seeing 4,000 nits worth of the Earth against a actually black background. It was blowing us all away. We saw dynamic range we never saw before, and he said, okay, we need this in the home. And it took us 20 years to make it happen, but it happened. But the pulsars were a necessary evil. They also weren't the quietest thing in the room either.
Well, that's so many fans because it got so hot. That was the thing.
Yeah, you had to cool that thing, yeah. So it was a beast to have, but it made HDR possible, and Dolby gets credit for that. On the other hand, now we're dealing with the current era where we've got brighter projectors, brighter flat panels, less tone mapping, and better compression. So this is a wonderful time in the evolution of home theater. I've got reasonably priced systems that can make reasonably big pictures. And if you tune them properly, design the room properly, I can have Joe go out there to someone's house and build a system that doesn't cost a fortune. And if he's only got to deal with 2 or 4 seats, he can make a limited budget, make a really good picture if he has some control over the room.
Exactly. And that's what I was just going to ask Joe. Like when you're doing this, what is it like? Like, what are the trade-offs that you're talking about, and what are, like, the compromises? Because that's, I mean, that's really what we do here. Like home theater, it's like, and I've said it a million times on my show. It's like we're taking a theater and putting it in a home, and it's really not supposed to be there. So it's all about the compromises. And as Joel just said, we're at this great point of evolution of home theater where I think we're at the beginning of it. I think the hockey stick, it's really going to take off from here where compression gets better and everything like that. But Joe, what's what kind of compromises are you dealing with, and what are the consumers saying about it?
Yeah, so I mean, you have to look at things like how much light control do you have in the room, right? We're talking about high dynamic range, but the darker I can get that room, the quieter, the darker the picture is going to be, the more you're going to see black, right? I think, Joel, you mentioned before, you open the door a little bit and a very high dollar projector looks the same as a much lower dollar projector because you can't control the light. You're losing that control of the darkness.
The noise floor is everything for dynamic range. And if I don't have good control over that, I can't use a projector. Or I've got to modify the projector and screen combination. And actually, the best-selling ambient light rejecting screens now do a remarkably good job, but they're not going to equal a great room. But they will fix problems that can be an average room looking much more dynamic. Joe, what percentage of screens are you putting in their ambient light rejecting?
So I'm dealing primarily with dedicated theaters, so we aren't really worrying about the ambient light rejecting. I was going to say the next thing we're talking about a lot of times is the color of the room, right? What color are you painting those walls, ceiling, floors, seating? Because all of that, whatever's coming off of that screen, if you're using a 2-piece front projection system, eventually it's going to bounce that light back onto the screen. So if you've got a yellow wall behind you, it's going to screw up the colors when that light, again, bounces back to the front and throws off everything. And that makes it very difficult to try and calibrate for, I'm assuming, Joel.
Well, how about that gold frame that goes all the way around the screen, left, right, up, and down?
Right.
And the first thing you see is a reflection on that. So one of the things I do with people when I'm helping design a system is just put up a white test pattern and sit down and say, okay, now what is bouncing that light back at us? And we had one guy who had beautifully varnished, African wood. as a frame around the screen. And the first thing I saw, that wood was lit up like crazy. So we went to the screen company. We just bought the material they use for the frame, and we covered the wood and the dynamic range visually. Now, this wasn't measurable, but taking away the bright three sides, the left, right, that artifact killed the dynamic range. So making that darker, we basically made a lens hood instead of a reflective issue. But putting up a white frame in people's rooms can give you an idea of what you have to fix to optimize dynamic range visually. And making the perfect room doesn't happen in most places. One of the things we're writing up in the standard is, what do you do with reflective things like A, the 4 subwoofers in the front of the room that are glossy black? B, picture frames left and right with movie posters. And all these things get lit up, and they all are basically sharp sticks in your eye. And these are easy fixes from time to time. And
in post-production, we have basically black hole rooms. And it's interesting because there's a paint that the artist, I think it's Anna Kapoor, came up with, which we use, which is the blackest black paint in the world. It's actually it has 0 reflections. It's like a black hole.
Yeah.
It's also phenomenally expensive as well, but it literally will absorb light. But going back to what you're saying about in certainly professional cinema, in Dolby cinema, we have a thing called the transition tunnel. And the whole transitional tunnel is basically, it will take you from the real world into the cinema world and allow your eyes to adjust, and it won't allow any outside interference, because it's the way you walk into the auditorium. And that was one of Dolby's more clever designs, the transition tunnel, to take you into that space. I mean, when we used to do stuff before, I mean, the guy I used to work with, Mitch Mitchell, he was one of the greatest imaging guys in the business. He was brilliant. He used to sit there in the screening room before we start with his eyes shut for 20 minutes, and then wouldn't open them until the lights had gone down.
yes,
That's that's a sort of obsession that we try and have. But I can understand. The trouble is, in home cinemas, it's more about the aesthetic, as opposed to, most people don't like the idea of a black hole.
Well, and
Well,
that's
that's
when
the
it comes
compromise.
to, is it lights on perception, or is it lights off performance? What are you trying to get in that room, right? And that's up to the client of, do you want to be immersed in the media you're watching, or do you want to show off how nice your tchotchkes look, right? And there's 2 different goals.
but Joe,
There's a light switch, so you can turn the lights off and hide the tchotchkes when you're trying to watch a picture.
difficult. One of the
To some
things I
extent.
found from designers, there's a book that the designers carry around. It's about a $4,000 book. It's made by X-Rite, the same people make our meters, and it's the Munsell book of nearly neutrals. So I was dealing with one designer who's doing a purple room in Miami for a South American client. And I asked, do you have your book of Munsell's nearly neutrals? She goes, of course. Out comes the $4,000 book. And I said, could I see all the shades of purple? So what we did, anything near the front of the room is the darkest possible gray with a hint of purple in it. And as we went closer to the front of the room, outside of the field of view, we brought in bright purple. So you can do wonderful things with shades of color, maintaining whatever color palette the designer wants, but keep the bright saturated colors away from the screen. And I did get a call that cracked me up a couple months ago. Jen calls me up. He goes, okay, I have to ask you a question. I've got a black room. I got black floor. I got black ceiling. I got black walls. I got black furniture. So I know one thing. This gentleman is single. Secondly, he wanted to know, how much bigger a projector can I get since my walls are black? And I said, 0. What you've done is created a good noise floor, but the relationship of the projector lumens and the screen size and the screen material versus the foot lamp that's coming off the screen has not changed because you made a perfect room. You can't go any bigger, but you will have a great looking picture. So getting a compromise on a room, you can work with colors, but getting rid of reflective surfaces, putting coatings on subwoofers and things, and dealing with screen frames. And sometimes just, you can have the gold frame around the screen as long as the area that gets lit up by the screen is blackened. All these can be worked out for minor incremental costs.
Building a false wall is the solution for a lot of what's up front. And Peter Aylett refers to it as a mullet design, where it is, business up front and it's a party in the back, because that whole room should be non-distracting as you're looking the front of where your image is, but what you're doing behind you may be less dire of an impact on that image.
A key thing to think about in the room is, when you sit in a room that you're going to watch something in, and if it's a projection room, whatever color the screen is, however dark the screen is, that is what your black is going to be. The black is not getting any darker than what that is. And so you want to do everything you can to minimize any light that's going to impact.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's the light coming off, everything like that. It's like Joe said, it's like you can do the, false walls, you can hide things. Everything, as we said, it's a compromise because like the client, as Joe puts it, might want to show off all their speakers, and that might be part of the aesthetic for them, but they need to understand. And is that hard to describe, to explain? Do you explain that to them, Joe? That it's like, okay, you can, if this is what you want, understand that this is a compromise over the quality of what you're going to see.
Yeah, so I mean, for the most part, we're doing 3 matching speakers behind an acoustically transparent screen. For the most part, if a customer has a piano gloss black mirror finish, that expect to be watching distracted images off of that. So it's just something that you need to explain to them.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, that's the sort of joke, because you could, you look at the height, well, certainly the Dolby Cinema projectors, they have 1,000,000-to-1 contrast ratio. If the room isn't up to it, the projector has nowhere near 1,000,000-to-1 contrast ratio.
Right.
You put an exit to the runway lights for people to walk, and your contrast ratio just went way down.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like everything we're talking about here is like, it's the equivalent in the sound, right? So you can have the best speakers in the world, but if the room isn't set up right and you don't have the right absorption and diffusion and stuff, you're not going to get the best performance out of the best speakers in the world.
Well,
and
if you have noise floor, if you can hear
the
HVAC
noise floor,
going,
exactly.
car going by outside.
This is system design 101.
Yeah.
You make things that don't interfere with the audio and the video, and you do the best you can. And Joe's out there in the field. If he has the privilege of doing dedicated theaters, you've got an easy job compared to my guys who do media rooms and multi-purpose rooms. You've got compromises, but thankfully with bright flat panels nowadays and big flat panels, we can get some pretty good immersive systems for a limited number of seats without spending a fortune. The audio is tougher because as you get closer to a bigger screen, the audio becomes very difficult to design. So if you're dealing with an 83-inch screen and 2 seats, getting the audio to work there is going to take some talent.
Yeah,
It's easier when
you get into the discussion versus like whether you have a solid screen, perforated screen, woven screen. Because a perforated screen, even a microperf screen, will have issues with resolution. Particularly if you're trying to do 4K, even, you get laser sparkles, a whole load of things that you'll get from a perforated screen.
That's a great topic right there, John, that you just touched on, is that, so if we're going for full immersion, as Joel was saying, and you have, say, you want to go to a 150-inch screen because it's going to take up the whole front wall, it's got to be acoustically transparent. It's going to affect the resolution, is what you just said. So that's going to be a compromise. You're going to have your speakers behind the screen. You're going to use an acoustically transparent screen that's going to affect the resolution. How do we make up for that? And I think, do we go back to the quality of the bit depth? Do we go back to the quality of, like Joel said, that smoothness and everything else? And that when you're sitting at the distance, all those compromises we just did by putting in an acoustically transparent screen, those compromises are kind of, gone by the wayside because we have good bit depth, because we have the smooth transition, and it's sitting at a distance. That is a huge immersive experience with great detail. Is that what we're getting at?
When Joe puts together a very big screen, the impact on the resolution from the screen is minimized. If I've got a smaller screen and people are sitting closer to it, the laser sparkles, the softening of the picture and the rest of it is an issue. If I'm dealing with the 150-inch screen and I'm sitting 1.5 screen heights, I'm far enough away where the resolution impact of whether woven or perforated is close to zero. By just getting further away from the screen itself, the artifacts are there, but they're minimized. And as much as I'm not a fan of anything other than a perfectly Lambertian flat screen, there's something about having the voice coil right behind the image on the screen. Joe's putting his 3 front speakers in front of there. The imaging that coincides with the audio image and the video image is irrefutably superior. So I'll take the hit in resolution If I have the budget to make it big enough where I sit back far enough, I stop bitching about the screen because I don't see the problem unless I'm up front focusing it.
Just to put it in perspective, when we master films, almost everybody who takes it seriously, we use a solid Studio Tech 100 screen, which was actually designed for us at Walt Disney.
Yeah, it's a rainbow emitter. It's a reference screen.
Yeah, Mr. Stewart used to. What happened is Mr. Stewart used to play golf with Walt Disney, and Walt Disney used to complain about how everyone in New York was complaining how everything in New York looked different from when they were sending it over from Burbank. So Mr. Stewart said, I can make those screens for you. So he was the one who designed the screens, and that's how Stewart screens came about, because of the golfing relationship between Walt Disney and then we've stuck with that. Studio Tech 100 is the reference solid screen, and anybody in post will use that. But the thing is, as Joel just said, you can't get the speakers behind it because it's solid. So it's a compromise. So the mastering suite for the picture is different than the mastering suite for the audio.
So if I've got a smaller room where I can't get far away from there and I have enough light, I'll go Studio Tech 100. If the room is dark enough and the screen is small enough for the projector to drive it, it's fine. And the audio is severely compromised. But if I can go much bigger with a bigger budget, I have less of a compromise. But using a Lambertian emitter to master is a necessary fact. You can't have that. Putting a Lambertian emitter in a home is a privilege. And that means you've done your homework on the environment and you've got enough budget to drive the screen. So it's a simple solution because a pure white simple screen for video is easy to calibrate, easy to design. You get a very good viewing angle and multiple chairs across because there's no hotspot from the gain, but you're compromising your budget. And, Joe, on your installs, how many of your screens are unity gain or using some type of gain if you have budget compromise?
A lot of times we're doing more woven screens these days. So we're actually, below a unity gain and then trying to get a bright enough projector to light that up.
Well, you can get a bright enough projector. You just have to bring money.
Bring money, yeah. and don't look right at the lens.
With the lasers, we normally say, do not look down lens with remaining good eye.
Right.
By the way, one of the things we're writing up in the standard is laser safety.
Yeah, makes sense.
Is a necessary evil. And above a certain light level, you've got to have inspections. And Andre, you must have gone through that with Sony.
Yeah. And when we started doing the first demos, like the guardrails we had to put up and things to make sure that people stayed out of anywhere near the light cone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is basic 101. What drives me nuts now are these ultra short throw projectors. And I've got a couple here I'm looking at that have auto shut off with motion sensors. That should be mandatory because little rugrats crawling around getting behind there will blind themselves. So these things are a hazard in the home that are ignored. But the two I have here, if you get your hand behind the screen, it shuts off the projector.
That makes sense.
All right. So let me ask everybody this. Fixed budget. What, with all the information that we've gone over today, what do each of you guys think that, like, if you're looking at a fixed budget, and what should a home theater enthusiast prioritize first? Bigger screen, better HDR. I'm pretty sure nobody's going to say higher resolution. I think we've nixed that. But like, each of you go around and like, where do you think your money should go? Display only. We're talking about like the best possible display. Obviously the rest of the room has its. We could be here all day. But display.
You're asking an impossible question.
I know.
I have to know something about the room to recommend the best possible display.
Yeah. Is it a light controlled room? Is it something that you have control over the color in the room?
I need information.
How big is it going to be?
I need all that information to make a good decision for the best display for the money. So I can't. Someone say, "What's your favorite projector?" I usually say, "Well, what's your favorite screwdriver?"
Yeah. Well,
the right one
or tool.
The right one for the job. So
right.
I have to know something about the room to tell you about the projector.
That's a great answer, Joel, because when people have asked me that, it's like the first factor I think of is, where are they in their home theater journey, right? Are they new? Have they been doing it? Is it a dedicated room? Is it a living room? How are you what kind of content are you going to be watching? And my answer has always been, if they're brand new to home theater and they're just trying, I'm like, get the big, I don't care about quality. I want the biggest screen because I don't want them to spend the money on like a 55-inch OLED because their budget says I have like $2,000 to spend. And you could go out and spend $2,000 on a 55-inch OLED because it's got all the bells and whistles. It's the best thing, but it's not going to give you that immersive experience. And you're so new at it, you don't even know what you just bought. I'd rather have them spend that $2,000 on a crappy 98-inch, live with that for a while and be like, this is immersive, and then see the flaws and then learn from there. I think what we're talking about today, though, is the person that's past that. Right. The person that is looking to what can I upgrade to, or how do I make my system better? And that's a great answer. It's like what you said, Joel, is there's so many factors that we really can't answer it. And you need to talk to a professional and describe your room. And it's like any one of you guys would be perfect to talk to because you all know like all the different factors. What do you guys think? What's the best way for people other than getting a hold of each of you? And we'll take questions in a minute from people. I have a few already here, but what do you guys think? How do people get that information? Because I don't think the internet is the best place to just Google the question because you end up hearing answers when, Joel, you nailed it on the head. Like, I can't answer that question. There's too many factors.
So call Joe. Or call whoever the Joe is that's closest to them.
Yeah, get in touch with Cedia.
Go to the Cedia website, get a couple of people nearby, go get professional advice, or waste your money, one or the other. So if you're going to go buy the TV, you go to Costco, you go buy that 98-inch TV set. And I just had a client do that. And they were complaining that when they watched the corner of the screen versus the center of the screen, it's very different. And someone walks across the screen in the movie, they go from dark to bright to dark. And they said, can you calibrate this? I go, absolutely. First, let's put it in the trash. And let's get something with uniformity. Let's get something with a good viewing angle, because you just spent a whole lot of money on a very big picture. And if you move your couch, I can get you a much smaller picture that'll be the same size if you move the couch. But you're talking better pixels. These are the worst pixels in the world. And we have an excess capacity in the plants right now for LCD. We don't know what to do with the glass. So cut big pieces, throw them out of Costco, let them buy containers and stuff them into the consumer market. And people will not like them if they see any of the artifacts. So if it's a background TV that's playing in the kitchen while you're cooking, that 98 is going to be just fine. If you can actually sit down and watch something on it, eventually it's going to be obnoxious and you're going to be bothered. But what amazes me in Costco is that 77-inch TV set is 10 feet away from the 98 at the same price. They still sell some 77s. So people are paying attention. They're not just buying by the pound. They're not buying by the inch. They're actually have read something or found somebody to tell them that you want a good TV, not the biggest you can buy. You want the best you can buy for your room. But when people ask me, what's the best projector? Well, I can't answer that. It's the first thing we talked about. So find your CDA guy, find your local guy, ask your friends who did a home theater for you, get the Joe in your neighborhood and sit down and have a conversation. And from there, you can determine something about your room and what you can do with the room, simply what you can do with your budget. It's a very complex question, and that's the reason we have a whole industry. Integrators, bless you.
Bless you, John.
Industry of integrators, and we've had a shakeout of integrators. Some of the flaky guys, thankfully, are gone. But the remaining guys who are doing a good job, they've got loyal following. They are available by phone all the time for consulting. They upgrade clients all the time. They do the software upgrades. And we've gone from, HD to HDR to all the rest of it and upgraded the audio. And Joe, how many of your clients have you changed the audio system for over the past 10 years? Have you gone in and do upgrades for them?
I think that the systems a lot of times in that case have expanded, right? As the immersive audio gets better, you can grow the system from where it started at a 5.1 or whatever.
So you're talking about a relationship with a client over years. Mm-hmm. So I talk with someone takes care of your landscaping, someone takes care of your airplane. I got a crew of people taking care of your boat. I take care of your video. And someone asked me, I'll be back here in 6 months to recalibrate the projector, because after 6 months, things will have changed. And he said, are you going to charge me? I said, you can count on it. Yes, I'm going to charge you, and I'll be back every year. And yes, I'm going to charge you, and you're going to get a good picture that's going to be maintained. And that's the essence of our relationship. I take care of things here, and we get compensated. And we'll keep you current. We'll keep you up to date. I'll let you know when you get an upgrade, when you should have an upgrade. And the Joes of this world are in contact with their clients. And Joe, do you have a demo facility by chance?
My own home theater, yeah.
Okay, that works.
Nice.
So you can bring people in. So I still remember the first Atmos demo I went to. Being an audiophile, closet audiophile, I don't admit it publicly, but yeah, I'm an audio hobbyist. And there was a gent by the name of Craig Eggers who was with Dolby for years. And we were in the setup day of CES when they announced Atmos. And I got there, I got the discs to show I was there. And he showed me an Atmos. And I said, this is terrible. What do you mean terrible? I go, you've been telling me you're selling surround sound for years. What you've been selling me is crap. This is surround sound. This is really immersive audio, and everything you've sold before is not. And I'm leaving the show having to buy something, which is my favorite part about going to a trade show. If I see something so much better than I have, I could buy it. That's my most successful visit to the trade show, because for me, it's all about the toys. If I go in and see something that sounds better, looks better, I'm a happy guy because I can go buy a better toy. And
Which is interesting, because I've worked with one or two directors who hate surround sound. They find it distracting, which is interesting how the conflict between artistic and,
So like silent movies?
Well, no, like Stanley Kubrick hated surround sound. And the fact that Eyes Wide Shut is only in 5.1 is because actually that was the minimum way you could release it. Actually, Eyes Wide Shut is effectively still mono. And if you look at a lot of Chris Nolan's films, they're only in 5.1 because he hates anything beyond that.
Yeah, but his audio rivals Atmos.
Oh yeah.
It's not about the codec; it's about the artist behind it, really. Because you're still getting the same frequencies, and we talk about that, and that's a whole other rabbit hole we can go down. But basically, so everybody, 4K is pointless. At what level? Go around each of you. 4K is pointless at what screen size and distance?
When you can't see the resolution anymore.
More than 3 picture heights.
3 picture heights. Joel, you said
any TV you have with good processing, which I need to take care of the low bit depth, any good processor is going to come to 4K TV. So I'm sorry, the question is pointless, because any good TV, by nature of the industry right now, is going to be 4K. It's not pointless. Any good TV is going to be. Should it be 4K? Should it be 2K? That ship has sailed.
Right.
But any quality processor in a TV set is going to come in a 4K TV set.
Right.
And let's touch into something else. You go into live motion sports. Live motion sports, your processing now has gone up a click. To make it less motion artifact ridden, I need the best possible processors. And they're coming with 4K TV sets. If I'm buying a 2K TV set, it's a cheaper TV set, the processor is going to be trash. So any good TV, by nature of the industry right now, with a good processor, is going to have 4K. I'm sorry, it's got to be 4K. It's not.
They're all going to be 4K. That's it.
All going to be 4K.
Yeah, but the point is, like, what I'm getting to is, like, HDR is the future, and the quality of HDR is because it's not about the resolution anymore. To your point, it's like I'm using the 4K versus 2K just as, like, we started out, like, okay, at a seating distance, you can't even tell a difference. It's basically to get rid of that, because that's over. The marketing of the resolution is pretty much over. Because
sorry, it's not over. Let's rephrase the question. What's the point of 4K versus 8K? That's a dicey question. Do I need 8K?
DJ, at the end of the day,
and the manufacturers are realizing that, because Samsung's the only one still building those panels.
At the end of the day, DJ, right? You start with the base layer. The base layer is the content any good, and then you build on that. So if it's really good content, then actually all the things starts to build up on that. I learned years ago. I worked with Quincy Jones years ago, who said basically, he told me, he said, you can't polish a turd, but you can roll it in glitter.
Well, I've been trying to figure out a way
to touch them.
I've been trying to figure out a way to get back to this, but yeah, when we talk about the quality of the pixels, one of the things that is the base of the quality of the pixels is what your source is. Yeah. If you don't have enough bandwidth coming into your system, you're not going to have the color, you're not going to have the detail, you're not going to have the dynamic range.
Okay.
I mean, you look at, right, here's a classic example. You look at anything shot digitally in 8K, it doesn't look particularly good. You look at Lawrence of Arabia as an 8K master, it'll blow it off the screen. Lawrence of Arabia was made in 1962. You know, that's the thing. It's the quality of the source. And this is, as I've always said, it's like, I think we hit a peak in the late 50s, early 60s in image quality as far as sources was concerned. And now we're only really sort of expanding upon that. I mean, Lawrence of Arabia is a 2001 is another example. Yeah, most people watch 2001 and think it was shot yesterday. They don't believe it was released in 1968. You know, it still leaves everything else standing.
What lenses were they using on those cameras, on the 65mm prints? So it's the quality that we're not using today if you're shooting with an iPhone.
Yeah, I mean the thing. Yeah, I mean you're talking about, this is the thing. I mean I was brought up on quality. It was beaten into me by a guy called Joe Dunton and Stanley Kubrick, who literally told me that they should teach picture quality in schools. They should teach image quality in schools because people don't appreciate what a good image is. And, it's all part of art. It's all part of understanding, the world around you. And that's the thing. I mean, you go back to the 35mm days, Stanley Kubrick used to make matte sets of prints. Barry Lyndon, he sat there, went through everything that came out of the lab, and he went, this one's a bit magenta, this one's a bit yellow, and he made a matrix, and he put all a matched set of prints together. So all the reels that were magenta all got put together, all the reels that were yellow got put together. So you had a continuous viewing experience. Okay, it was not perfect, but at least you were watching a unified experience of an all yellow, a slightly yellow tinge print or a slightly magenta tinge print. Obviously, certain things he would reject uniformly, but it's the quality. Most filmmakers these days don't understand quality. They're just grateful that the film's being released. I mean, a classic example of this I was saying to Steve when I had lunch with him the other day. You take the Running Man. The DCP of the Running Man was atrocious. It looked out of focus. The reason being is because when we devised the DCP standard, we used a thing called wavelet codec, which is an idea that I pushed forward because they didn't really. Originally, the Hollywood guys wanted to use DCT. And I said, no, we've got to use wavelet. And they went, why? I said, well, because when you reduce the bandwidth, it doesn't block, it goes out of focus. What's happening now is you're getting, for some reason, the DCP of the Running Man was such a low bit rate, it looked out of focus. You look at the 4K disc of the Running Man or the Kaleidescape version of the Running Man, absolutely stunning. So, this is the thing. People, perception of what is image quality these days is very variable. And even people who run professional companies don't seem to understand what image quality is all about. I mean, I would have rejected the DCP of the Running Man. I'm surprised that Edgar Wright actually allowed it out there because he's obsessive.
All right.
So then if you take any of those pictures that we know are good quality pictures and you feed it through a 6 megabit pipeline over the internet, you have had to throw away a lot of that information. And it's not going to all get reproduced on your screen and in your audio system.
So that actually is a question that somebody had, is like, so this is former Hobbit 5599 asked, does any of this apply to streaming content, or is it exclusive to physical media? And that's exactly what we're talking about. It's everything, right? And like John was saying earlier about 10-bit versus 12-bit in compression and what you're going to get on a stream as opposed to what you get in a physical media or on a Kaleidescape. It's like, what is the difference going to be? What does the compression mean? And how does it, that's that question right there. Does this apply to streaming and physical? Yes, it applies to all of it. That's the difference between the two.
Well, in simple numbers, if you go from 6 meg to 100 meg per second, you've got a dramatically different feed. And again, watching on your phone, they can look the same. Put on a 77-inch screen, you don't have to go huge. Go 77-inch of close viewing distance. That 100 meg versus 6 meg, it's a different experience. And the artifacts of the 6 meg make it less immersive. Now go bigger than that, and it gets to be worse. Your artifacts bother you more, and the high-quality download or your high-quality disc is going to be a much more immersive experience and much less bothersome. Less artifacts take you out, but it's less convenient. So in the music business, we had MP3 as our nightmare, and it took over by convenience. And streaming, as much as it's better than it was, it doesn't compare with a 100 meg disc or 100 meg Kaleidescape feed. And if you've made a good investment in hardware, you need to make an investment in software. It's one half of your picture quality.
Yeah. Well, you're
Like-
only as strong as your weakest link.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
Right?
mean, it's like the streaming is the wild, wild west. I mean, you take, there's no consistency between the different services. I mean, okay, I'm going to come down and say, actually, as far as I'm concerned, I think Disney Plus is the best, but then that's because I'm biased.
Just a little bit.
But it's whether you're into a casual experience of viewing or you're into a you want the best. You want the best experience. It's like you take it seriously. It's the difference between whether you buy a glugging wine or a fine bottle of wine. It's how much you are prepared to invest in the experience. And this is the thing: is if you're going to spend all this money on a home cinema, you want to actually get the best out of it. I mean, you don't want to.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah. What is the best to you, right? And that's what we were talking about with Joe. Is like, is the experience like I've had this discussion with people. I always want to have a projected system because I always want that light at the back of the room. I want a reflected image off of a screen. That's what I grew up with. Can you get a better image in the future? Are you going to be able to get a higher quality HDR image with a display at the front of the room? Yeah. But that's not necessarily what I'm after. So what are the compromise? What is the overall experience you're looking for in your room? And I think what we're trying to do today is, like, I learned this in art school. You can't create art until you learn how to do it right. So like, you need to know what the best possible is, and then you drop. If you want to make a compromise off of that, then you can. But that's what I think we're talking about today is like, for the display aspect of it, how do you get the best possible? And then from there, you'll know why you're making these compromises, why you're going to have the lighting in your room that you're going to have, or why you're using the display system that you're using. But just know what's possible out there, and then you make your decision off of that.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at this is if you're thinking of doing a new room, go someplace that does have a super high quality demonstration facility and see what it could be. And then say, and they'll tell you how much that costs. And then you say, well, this is, here's where I want to make the compromises.
Yeah. And why it looks so good. Because a lot of people go in and experience that and be like, what the heck? Why does this look so good? And I've experienced stuff that you'd be like, this looks amazing. And you go, what are you running? Well, that's a 1080. That's 1080p. And then you find out it's the file size. It's this. And then you got to get into the nitty gritty from there. But that's what we're talking about here. It's like, why are things so good? Like, objectively, like, what is the best? And how do you get there?
If you look at what you're saying, DJ, filmmaking is a series of informed compromises. That's everything to do with, from the script to the time that it gets to the screen, is an informed compromise. It's like everybody's trying to achieve the best they can, but you still have to compromise. I mean, even the very best. I mean, I worked with David Lean, and even David Lean had to compromise on many things, even though he'd sit around for days waiting for the right clouds to be in the background. I mean, you still have a finite amount of time, finite resources. You still have to make a series of control compromises. I mean, that's the thing. And it's how good are the people who are involved in the process? You got to make those compromises. That's the difference between great people and people who haven't got a clue, because they know what they're doing. They're using information they have. They've done it before. They can make good informed decisions. I mean, that's the thing. It's insight and knowledge. That's the whole thing. And it's like, however much, I mean, at the end of the day, even Stanley Kubrick made compromises. I remember on Eyes Wide Shut, there's a sequence in there which is in the bathroom where there's a reflection of everybody in a edge of a chrome thing in the bathroom. I remember in the rushes, everybody looking at each other going, oh my God, there's a reflection of the camera in there. And everybody looked at Stanley, and Stanley went, well, it's filmmaking. We're getting old.
Yeah. It's funny. Let it go. Yeah, good for those who notice. Question. I think you touched on this a little earlier, Joel, but does Joel think a video processor is needed nowadays? From Skippy Turtle 1. Do you think it's needed to have an external video processor, or you answer that?
On the best devices with a good calibration, the need for it is far less dire. And the few processors out there that are better than the ones inside the TV sets are really expensive and difficult to set up. So it's a rare thing that I'm seeing the processors, but over the past 3 to 4 years, the processor sales have dramatically increased from almost zero to going into every high-end system I see. And a lot of it's tone mapping. So the weakness of most of the built-in processors is the tone mapping. So if I have a big enough screen, the external processors do a much better job on tone mapping, and they do a much better job on motion processing for live sports. So the need is not dire, but it's there. And it's only recently that they've come back.
And that leads to this question from Paul Hurt, 839, says, here you go. So even the latest commercial cinema tech only hits 300 nits. Dolby Cinema hits just over 100. If a movie is graded for 1,000 nit HDR for home, do you see issues tone mapping it?
Well, if I've got a 300 nit home system, I've got tone mapping issue.
It's not cinema hitting 300 nits. It was decided, having done many experiments, there was 300 nits, 600 nits, 800 nits, and 1,000 nits. They did tests in DCI, and they extensively tested it for a year. And the conclusion they came to is that overwhelmingly everybody preferred 300 nits because it actually was the less fatiguing of the whole lot. Everybody else, all the other systems above 300 nits on a large screen gave you fatigue. So, I mean, 300 nits is on a big screen is very bright. I hate to say this. Yeah. It's like, I don't think anybody would complain about 300 nits. If you watch 1,000 nits on a 70-foot screen, it is dazzling. Absolutely dazzling.
No, it's painful.
Yes. You need sunglasses. You literally need sunglasses. 300 nits is very, very bright. And it's not a compromise. It was a decided standard. And now we make DCI 300 nit masters of most of the film. Well, all the films that we put out are DCI 300 masters, which is different. This is where we go back to ACEs, because actually we can derive using various different software any dynamic range version. So there's two master grades. The cinema grade and the home cinema grade are not necessarily the same. So you can't do one size fits all.
Okay, so he's actually, there's more to the question. It's like, so if you see here, it says, do you see issues tone mapping it all the way down to maybe 100 nits peak for a home projector? And
not if you have a decent video processor. They'll I mean, like the Lumagen will do an amazing job because it's been well tuned for that whole process.
And that's what I think Joel's getting to, is like you're seeing more and more of that because HDR is so important, and projectors, as we said before, like they're not capable of handling Dolby Vision because they don't know the screen size. The projector is set to do a certain thing, but the bigger the screen, the further away changes the brightness. So that's why you would need an exterior video processor to map all that out, because the processing inside these projectors is at the lower end. I think you said, Joel, like the higher end ones can handle it.
Ones, they're doing a good job of tone mapping, not a great job, because it's unknown to the projector manufacturer what the screen size is going to be and what the actual brightness coming off the screen is going to be. So if I take someone with a Lumagen or a Mad VR setting up, they know what the light output is. So just knowing what the reality that you are calibrating for changes the entire equation, as opposed to manufacturing something hundreds per day and guessing what the screen size is going to be. If you're on site with the Mad VR and a Lumagen, you've got some time that you've got to invest, but you can fine tune the system for the application, the light output, and you could do a far better job because you're on site with a known light output. So just that alone changes the entire equation, not guessing. You're real on your on-site, and you're getting a really good processor to do a good job on tone mapping. And it's a rare projection system that is 300 nits. The majority of what I'm seeing is closer to Dolby 108. And unfortunately, too many of them are less than Dolby 108. So the video document, the system design, the minimum for the higher levels is going to be 108 nits. We're taking the Dolby 108 nits as the minimum. And from there, you qualify.
The only projectors that can do 300 nits on a large screen are the Barco light steering projectors. So those are the ones that we master for 300 nits. No one else can get. Yeah, you're right. No one else can come close to that. But that's why the only projector actually meets the DCI 300 spec is actually the Barco light steering projector at the moment.
Yeah, but you're dealing with DLP projectors that don't fit in homes unless they have their own room behind the theater.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, DJ, real quick, back to that video processor. It's not only for the tone mapping, but there are some that may need it for a nonlinear stretch or to control masking. So there are other reasons to do a video processor. It really kind of depends on your screen and other elements that are associated with the system.
Yeah, my clients do not like lens control for aspect ratio. They have no patience for it. But the instantaneous transfer, and as much as I don't care for nonlinear stretch because it destroys geometry, my clients like it.
Mm-hmm.
And they like filling the 235 screen with 178 content, and it drives me nuts. But hey, nobody dies. It's their theater.
Not yet.
I know exactly what you mean, Joel. I mean, Barco took me to they invited me, took me over to meet some billionaire client of theirs who wanted a system. And he said to me, I don't like any of this. All I want is something that fills the screen all the time. There's no black bars, and I want it at 60 frames per second always. And I went, oh, okay. So you're not interested in all the time and effort we spent on making it look good then?
Well, in billionaire processors for billionaires, I only had one guy who gave me an intelligent answer for nonlinear stretch. Okay, he owns a sports franchise, and we're putting up one of his tapes of the game. And I'm looking at the guys on the left and right side who look like they're whales because they're stretched out. And I go, what about those guys? He goes, I didn't pay much for those guys. I don't care what they look like.
That's great.
So he's watching his sports 235.
We love sports. ESPN is keeping us going. We love ESPN.
I mean, the processing side for aspect ratio switching, it's instantaneous, so people love that. Nonlinear stretch, they like it. But as far as the tone mapping, you do a better job. But the best projectors and best flat panels are pretty damn good nowadays. But you can do better if the budget permits. And again, as you get bigger in size, your tone mapping errors become proportionally more visible.
Well,
So
that's
the big screen.
And also, if you're feeding a decent projector with a decent source, it's got enough information to display the bright pixels and the dark pixels, versus if a streaming thing that's been compressed, you don't have the dynamic range that you have in a higher quality source like a disc.
Yeah, it's a tougher job. The better the source, the easier the processing, the less mistakes.
Also, just to sort of interesting because then the sources aren't 8K, but some of the very high-end Dolby Cinema installations are actually pseudo 8K because they use two projectors and they're half pixel offset. So literally, it's done that way to give you a pseudo 8K image to hide the pixels. Because as Joel was saying, some of the screens are huge. They're 100 feet across. So you don't want to be able to see the pixel structure. So you hide it by stitching two projectors together.
Yeah. So I liked what going off of what Joel just said there about you don't really need a video processor if you have a higher quality source, a higher quality on a high quality projector, say, or display. And then what Andre was saying about, you're feeding it, I think it was Andre that said it, like, so now you go to streaming sources, which are lower quality, right? So when I had my projector system and I had a video processor put in, what I noticed was what the video processor was doing for my Kaleidescape or discs it was good. I mean, there was an uptick there, but what the uptick that I saw, the huge upgrade I saw, was going to streaming. All my the quality of my like Apple TV images, my Netflix images, Amazon, all the HDR coming from my streaming was vastly improved. And it's like everything we've been talking about today was the quality of like how much, like the bit depth and how much information you can get through. And if you have a good quality source like a Kaleidescape or the disc, there's not much. That's what you're looking for. It had nothing to do with resolution. It's about your black levels, your gradation, everything like that. And where the video processor came in is it made up for the lack of information that you get in streaming, the compression. It upgraded it to almost what you would see with a Kaleidescape or a disc. Does that make sense from like a car painter's perception?
It makes the biggest improvement the lowest common denominator. Because what John was saying, streaming is a wild, wild west. And within each streaming service, going from program to program, the quality varies wildly, let alone from one service to another. It's extremely inconsistent. Inconsistent enough where sometimes family wants to watch something that's unwatchable. I've got a flat panel room. We just move. There's something that's just not watchable on the big system.
Well, it
And
can be inconsistent time of day too. You watch something at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. depending on the traffic of the internet in your neighborhood. It can change what you're watching.
yeah, fortunately, we're living someplace where we've hardwired everything with fiber. We're fixed gigabyte for every home here in 1,200 homes, and we get less of that. And that's become, in our neighborhood here, a very successful change in cable providers in neighborhoods. And people like it. It's much easier on the eyes. The lesser quality is not as bad as the best quality. And this is the future. We're going to have better bandwidth going to homes. We're going to have better compression. And the need for processing is going to be on the high end, where the pictures are big enough and the viewing angles are large enough, where the low end content just looks gruesome. And as you get bigger, you got to get fussy. And if you're going to spend real money on your hardware, I'm sorry, I'm a fussy bitch. If I'm going to spend real money on hardware, I'm looking at an immersive picture, and the low quality software takes me out of the movie. And upping the game costs money. It's less convenient. I got to wait sometimes hours for it to be available, but I'll watch it the next day and I'll enjoy it immensely. And that's the nature of our game. And no one ever said this is an inexpensive hobby.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. It is. The bigger you go, the larger the flaws could be. So you need to refine the system. So yeah, you bring in a video processor to up the quality of that image.
Because sometimes what they want to watch is not available in high quality.
Yeah, that's true too.
Either take it or leave it. You watch it the quality you get. So you throw a processor in, it makes it less objectionable, or sometimes just fine to watch, as you say. Sometimes it approaches the 100 meg system with we're getting 16 here. So 16 to 100 is a big difference. But when I put a processor in, the difference is less. It's still there, but my worst quality sources are improved the most. And the best sources are improved slightly, but not everything I want to watch is available in the best quality source.
Yeah. The other, going back to 4K, 2K, I can't believe we didn't mention this earlier. We got Andre here from Kaleidescape, but Joe and I both experienced at CEDIA, sitting there watching a 2K image with all the bells and whistles of HDR, Dolby Vision, and everything, which you get on the Kaleidescape M. Is that right?
Empire, yep.
Okay, the M. I always mix up the letters. It's like, but Joe saw it firsthand, and you're looking at a 2K image. Now, granted, these 2K images are being fed into 4K televisions, so that's upgrading it to the 4K.
Right.
But at a 77 I can't remember what size display you had at CEDIA, but
98.
Was it 98?
Yeah.
The big
And we were standing, Joe, how far away did we stand when for that demonstration? You're like 10 feet
10
away.
feet back, yep.
Yeah. And you would have sworn it's a 4K image, but it had all the bit rate. It had all the information. It was the 4K file going through and being basically, I hate to use the term dumbing it down, but we're talking about the resolution, which isn't as important, which we've established here. So
and
it's
one
like
of the things that what the Strato M actually does, because it's taken the 4K file and downscaling it to 1080p, it's still got 4 times the color information. So we take that and create 422 color out of the 420 that comes in the source. So that's why the HD image is going to be the best 2K image you're ever going to see.
But Andre, you're super sampling.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna take 2K and upconvert it to 4K, that's a bitch. That's a hard job. Taking 4K and down converting it to 2K, I'm super sampling my master, ending up with 2K. I'm sorry, that's cheating. That's a really easy processing job. That's a piece of cake to do. That's not hard. Okay, give me a 4K master. A 4K master gets me a great 2K deliverable.
Yep.
That's why we shoot at 6, 8, or 12K, because then we can make a really nice 4K out of it.
You're super sampling, and then the processing is easy. Throwing pixels away is very easy compared to making them up in thin air.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's interesting what nobody's talked about here, which is the elephant in the room, is actually that all the things you're watching is actually downscaled anyway, because we all master at 406, and you're all watching it at 3840. So there's a 6.7% scale that's already been applied to the image. So you're not actually pixel mapping what we mastered in the first place anyway.
Right.
The down-resing work. It's simple. That's not a problem. That's an easy processing. You don't need real money to do that. It's simple math. Up converting is the bitch.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So with that, let's wrap up with that. Where do you guys see this going? John, great segue right there. It's like everything we're getting at home is down converted. What's the future look like 5-10 years down the road? Do you guys think it's like the improvement in compression so we can get more information? Or is it like the file sizes are just going to get bigger because we can do it? Because it's going to be like, okay, physical media is going to change into something that can handle more. Kaleidescape files are going to be larger. Where do you guys see the future going in improving the quality of what we get at home? Joel, you go first.
Simple, bigger, brighter, blacker, more colorful, less artifacts. And we're going there every month. And as I get new pre-production pieces in, I continue to be blown away by some of the improvements that come in. And sometimes I'm looking at measurements and the accuracy is a little better on the EOTF and the grayscale is a little tighter. And the color accuracy on some of my scans are looking better. And when I actually look at the picture, the sum total of all those little improvements is big. So we're nickel and diming improvements a little bit at a time, getting closer to what we want, getting closer to good EOTF, getting closer to accuracy. And some of the things we're seeing now, we're taking some of the color accuracy scans. We're starting with less saturated colors and measuring how we track from less saturated to more saturated. And that's been a major improvement in the last 24 months. And as we measure that on some of the less expensive projectors, I compare it to the Sony reference monitors, which are almost perfect. I'm getting a lot of consumer product now, close to perfect in color tracking, in the right mode with a little bit of color management calibration. We're getting better pictures with less dramatic calibration. And what's really refreshing is some of the out-of-box modes. On the performance levels for our new standard, the level 1, 2, 3, and 4 are escalating. Okay, level 1 is acceptable, and the level 1 acceptable calibration is going to be for a performance standard, pick the right mode. And if I had to pick an improvement in consumer TVs, it's been in one mode in each TV that resembles the standard that production used. And some of the modes, whether you're going to call it ISF or filmmaker or movie or whatever it is, if you could find the right mode in the TV set that the engineer actually designed to be accurate as best he could in mass production, it's a massive improvement. Now, sometimes that makes it darker. You got to go to a luminance control and pop it up. But the out-of-the-box performance in particular modes on projectors and flat panels has dramatically gotten better to the point where some of my calibrators are saying, it wasn't that far off at SDR. What about HDR? But they're saying it wasn't that far off out of the box. That's progress. That means people in manufacturing give a damn. And I've had the privilege of meeting a bunch of the people in manufacturing at different manufacturers who do give a damn. They're getting more of a voice because of forces like you who are talking about this publicly. Reviews coming up, and they're talking about the modes. And the publicity about the better modes has aided the engineers in being able to tell the boss, see, I told you so. You got a good review. See? And these guys just need budget. So finding the right mode, if you don't have a calibrator, finding the right mode on the right thing and putting it in a reasonable room with the reasonable screen size and viewing distances out of the box now is acceptable, where not too many years back, out of the box without a calibrator was absurd.
Which is interesting. This is where Kalman Home, I think, has made a huge impact on particularly people buying like LG OLEDs, because for a couple of $100 you can effectively calibrate it yourself and you can learn. What's interesting is the education there. People who actually like to learn and find out. Because I think Kalman Home is a very, very clever product. Well,
that's half of it. Remember, LG on the other side gave you the capability for it to be calibrated. So half of it is the home calibration. The first half is making the thing calibratable. And that's been my career for my whole life. Putting the controls into the consumer's hands that used to be buried in the service mode, making the controls work, getting a buddies at Calman to come up with affordable, not 3,500 solutions, but affordable brand specific things, which helps them. And that's why I say these are golden days. It's working
absolutely.
Yeah.
Andre, where do you see the future?
5, 10 years. Just trying to get to better pixels. It doesn't necessarily mean more resolution. Just the cost of creating 8K content is prohibitive. So that the existence of production in 8K seems like it's way beyond my lifetime. But I think taking the pixels that are available and applying more information to them, more data to them, more bandwidth to them, so that you can get that information into the display means that you're going to end up with a better picture on the screen. So we're just expanding the capability of the source devices.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, what do you think?
I think we're, seeing the slow death of physical media, right? There's a lot of studios and countries where you can't buy the discs anymore. So I think that having high quality resident files, they'll continue to get better and better with compression. I think the bandwidth coming into the home, the pipeline's going to get better. But still, if you can have a reference quality file at home, that's going to continue to outperform the convenience of streaming. And I think that's where picture quality is going to stay.
All right. John?
Well, I contest the death of physical media because at the moment we're making more money than ever out of 4K discs. In fact, actually, us and the other studios are making so much money we actually can't make them fast enough. That's the problem. I mean, the capacity dropped off, and then suddenly now everybody's buying them. I mean, literally, some of our titles are in the fifth reprint at the moment, which is something that we haven't seen for years. And I mean, we made the decision in some cases to release them as steelbooks because actually that helped us and helped the market because they're selling as collectible items. But anyway, the future is interesting because the games market is the dark, shadowy figure that's standing over everything. Because as I said earlier, that you're now starting to see the first 1,000 hertz monitors coming out, and gaming looks like it's already in 8K. It's moving to 12K, 16K. And that's the thing that's going to be pushing that. Movies, I don't think will go beyond 4K because there's no reason to, because we haven't got anything really to prove beyond that. But you're going to start to see displays because of the economics. They're going to probably start moving to higher resolution, but you won't be using them, particularly for the stuff we're doing, unless you're into gaming. And gaming, again, is the thing that's driving a lot of these elements. I mean, why do they keep pushing HDMI? You've got DisplayPort, whatever it is, the latest version of DisplayPort which supports 16K. The latest version of HDMI supports 16K because of the gaming market. The area we're in, no one's interested in that area because it's 24 frames, 4K. That's what you're interested in. That's what people want. And I think that's going to stay for some time. I mean, 2K. It was interesting. The Kaleidescape product that they produced is brilliant. It is actually a very good alternative for eCinema. It's the DCI approach of getting old films and repertory films in the DCI format is actually quite expensive. So in the digital cinema market, of actually having a Kaleidescape M actually is a very cost-effective, useful way of your cinema being able to actually show old films at a very low cost, because you have to literally in the UK. I'm trying to work out what would be in America, but in the UK, you could show an old film in your auditorium, your cinema for the public for £16 on a Kaleidescape M. You'd have to obviously buy the file on the Kaleidescape. The licensing fee through Film Bank could be £16, whereas the DCI equivalent would be about £200. So there's lots of advantages there, and there's a lot of films, like all black and white films, don't need to be in 4K because a lot of them aren't shot that well, so you wouldn't actually tell any difference. The dynamic range is there, but the resolution isn't there. So it's horses for courses. And I think I admire what Kaleidescape was doing there by getting a product that actually is a good cost-effective alternative into the cinema market, which also helps in the home market. Because, I mean, some people don't like having large televisions. I mean, it's interesting. A friend of mine who's a wonderful cinematographer who's won 2 Oscars for The Mission and The Killing Fields, he for years had a 21-inch television. So he wouldn't have been that bothered. He actually would have loved probably. Hey, I've got 21-inch. The Kaleidescape M would have been perfect because he wouldn't need anything beyond that. I mean, he still only has, I think it's like a 44-inch television. I mean, there's lots of people I know who. It's like matching to what you're doing. I mean, if you're going to go to the trouble that we're talking about with really, £1 million home cinema, then yeah, you want to put the very best in, the very highest
Yeah.
quality. But if you're at home and you've got a 44-inch television and you want to watch high quality movies because you can't guarantee that it's going to be on streaming, then the Kaleidescape M is a brilliant device for that. I mean, I can see why they did it. I mean, but also I can see where it fits into the e-cinema market as well, because that was a brilliant thing. I think they did a deal with an old colleague of mine, Dr. Chong at GDC, who was one of the first pioneers of trying to get involved with DCI when we were involved with them. And I think that's a brave move of theirs. It's a good move. It's a solid move. And this is the thing. It's about education. It's like,
yes,
the whole thing is always about, it's not more pixels, it's better pixels.
Absolutely. That's what we're talking about today. That's exactly it. And it's like everything improving your image. It's not about getting more of them. It's about the bit rates. It's everything going forward.
I'm happy today because actually on Monday, Kodak announced 2 new film stocks. So,
oh, here we go.
I mean, this is the thing where everybody goes, oh yeah, technology, faster, bigger, better. And actually, everyone's trying to reinvent the wheel. And sometimes I still think the best source is you shoot on film, master digitally, distribute digitally. That will give you the best possible quality. And that was always the consensus. TI, when they first came out, that's what they always said when they introduced digital cinema in the late 90s, when we did Star Wars Episode 1 on the Pew's JVC light valve and a 1.2K digital cinema projector, I may point out, with an anamorphic lens. It was unbelievable that people sitting there and were amazed by a 1.2K image. So,
yep, and because it's about the, I don't know if fidelity is the word, but it's it's the vibrancy, it's everything. It's the
beauty then was, it's interesting because Joel mentioned P3 color space, and the reason that we settled on P3 color space is because it's non-proprietary, because everything at DCI had to be non-proprietary.
Mm-hmm.
And TI had a color system called P7V2, which was proprietary. So if we'd have used that as a standard, we would have to have paid TI a license fee every time we used it. And P7V2 actually was very good. It produced really nice golds. It was one of its selling points is that you can get really nice golds. It wasn't a color triangle. It was a color, whatever it is, a 6-sided shape, whatever 6-sided is, hexagonal color space.
But John, that JVC light valve was a nasty little thing to work on. Stability was 6 hours. So if you calibrated it with uniformity, it was designed for 6 hours, because that actually goes back to war games and NASA and NATO. It was a defense project. It was originally, it was used aerospace.
Besides, it's funny you say it only lasted about 6 hours, because the film that was primarily, as well as Star Wars Episode 1, was the film called The Ideal Husband, which is probably the longest most marriages probably lasted.
But this was fun. DJ, can I touch on one other topic we have a topic on? It's a pet peeve of mine and a major disappointment. Maybe we can close with this.
We'll close with this, yes.
Okay, part of the process we're looking at right now is the original 2012 roadmap for HDR done by the International Telecommunications Union. They had a whole layout of 10-bit and 12-bit and HDR and getting into immersive sound and all the rest of it. It was all laid out. And there's one thing they laid out that has not happened, and it's stillborn. And it's bothering the hell out of me. And it's very much like looking at the first HDR pulsar. I've had the misfortune of seeing a whole bunch of sports on big screens shot and played back at 120 hertz. So high frame rate video was part of what we're aiming at. Now, I'm not going to tell John that the King's Speech has to be done at 120 hertz, because it's 24. The art form is 24. It'll be 24 for long after we're all gone. And film is an art form of 24, is fixed and absolutely beautiful. However, football at 30 is not. And we were going to go to 100 in the UK type PAL countries and 120 here. And 120 camera acquired and TV played back is magnificent. It's equivalent to an HD moment. Now, all the HDMI systems have been retuned to be able to handle 120 hertz. Okay, the problem we have is the bottleneck. Most of the cameras out there, and Andre, back in your camera days, we had a flip switch to 120 on cameras a very long time ago. So most of the high-end cameras can do 120 at the flip of a switch. The TVs are all ready, and there's none of it coming. It is stillborn. And as the broadcasters are losing more and more influence, the ability to get 120 sports is diminishing, and there's no uproar because people haven't seen it. It's a magnificent improvement. And we've been playing 30 pictures per second since 1939 at the New York World's Fair when we showed NTSC. We're still stuck in the 30s as far as frame rate for sports. In movies, we don't need it, but it will revolutionize sports viewing, and it will be a leadership position for anybody to be able to deliver sports in 120. And I don't see it happening, and I'm not happy.
No, I agree with you. Sports is the one and only area where high frame rates really works because it doesn't look right. You're right. Motion blur is unacceptable.
It's terrible. The motion blur. And as I get immersive big screens, sports become horrible to watch because the artifacts are in my face and you can't get by them. And the processing, one of the reasons I put in an external processor was for sports. It really helps sports. And what really helps sports is to acquire at 120 and play back at 120. And that was the plan back in 2012. And we have failed miserably.
Which sport do you think benefits the best from 120 hertz? Because I know which it is because we've done tests.
They all do, but I'll take something simple like tennis. Just watch the tennis soccer and watch the trails of the tennis balls. Something simple to watch where you will do an A/B. Now I saw Wimbledon done by the BBC at 50, 60, and 100 and 120. And just watching the ball gave you a headache at 50 and 60.
Basketball actually benefits the best from 120 hertz.
Wait, hold the lines. It's terrible. But everything benefits in sports.
Yeah. That one in particular because there's the most motion going on.
So is the issue exactly what we were talking about with movies? It's like, okay, so it's not resolution. We need more, information per pixel for movies to get your color right and all this. But now with sports, we're talking about information is more frames per second. So that's more information.
Let me break up resolution into temporal and spatial. Spatial is the number of pixels left and right. Temporal is the amount of refreshes you get. It is equally important in sports to have spatial and temporal improvements. We've got spatial, which makes temporal artifacts worse. As I get my spatial artifacts taken under control, I put in some of the motion artifacts on a 1.5 screen height screen, and I'm sitting here saying, God, this is awful.
Yeah. But
that's why during the transition to DTV, going to HD broadcasting, that two of the networks decided that they were going to go with 720p because it was 720p 60 versus 1080p 30.
Good argument. That was Sony's argument, and they weren't wrong.
Yeah, it was ESPN and Fox Sports wanted to be able to show football at 60 frames a second.
Also, it was I versus P.
Right.
Progressive versus interlace. It won on both counts. High frame rate and less motion artifacts. Yeah. But the number wasn't marketable. It wasn't a big number. The big number wins in marketing.
Please never mention the word interlaced ever again.
But my point was,
we're talking about non-regular, because that should have died. Non-regular frame rates like 2398, 5997.
But my overall point, though, Joel, was the amount of information going into the pipeline, like to get that frame rate, right, or get that 120 hertz. That's just more information than 30 hertz. So what's the compression algorithm to get that information through and broadcast it to?
We're better at compression every day,
right? But
a compressed 120 will look better than a non-compressed 30.
Oh yeah.
Motion artifacts will go away. It'll get softer, but the motion artifacts will go away. And the softness will help the motion artifacts that remain. And unfortunately, it's stillborn. I don't see any hope for 120 hertz sports where the movies don't need it. Right. The gamers have it. The gamers are leading the planet in 120 hertz, and their motion at 120. All the gaming monitors went to 120 way before the consumer monitors because the gamers were all over 120, and you got lots of content. Now, watching, I'm a car racing junkie as far as games. Games at car racing at 120 are addictive. It's smoother. It's better.
As I say, I'm intrigued the fact that the first 1,000 hertz monitors are coming out now. So you'll be even more happy then with your car racing at 1,000 hertz.
So the idea is then maybe it's stillborn, like you said, because the education isn't there. People don't know. They don't want to put the money into marketing it because it's going to be money to produce it. So why don't we just let the general public be ignorant about it? And that's why we're here today, so that the general public isn't ignorant.
Kaleidescape took a leadership position in high bandwidth movies. And they struggled in the beginning because they were having some political and legal headaches. When they figured out the model of actually being a partner with the studio, the high bandwidth success was guaranteed. Because all of a sudden, I had a premium solution for my viewing. At a few dollars, I could get a better solution. Where's my premium solution for sports? It's marketable. Kaleidescape has proved that quality is marketable. No doubt, it's done.
Yeah.
We know it's there.
Yep.
Where's the Kaleidescape of sports? Who's going to take that on to sell us something in a higher quality Super Bowl?
You're gonna have to pay for it.
Where are the I'll pay for it in a heartbeat.
Exactly. So you got to get that. You got to get that out to people to be like, okay, to get your higher quality, you need this box or this system, or to get this, and they'll broadcast it to you, and it's going to cost money, and then eventually that would come down because more and more people would adopt it, and it would become more mainstream.
It doesn't have to come down.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Kaleidescape has proven the fact that premium content can sell at a premium price, and people are saying thank you and just clicking and buying.
Absolutely.
I'll click and buy on sports in a heartbeat. Where's the entrepreneur to bring us 120 hertz? So I'll ask the audience watching, the entrepreneur to get 120. The cameras are all done. Flip the switch to the camera, they're there. The TVs are all done. We've re-engineered HDMI to take care of it. We're ready. The cameras are ready. We just have to connect part A and part B, and there's a fee to be paid for that. All my clients will pay it in a heartbeat.
Well, I've just checked. Yeah, ATC3 supports 120 at 4K.
Instantly, we thought that was the great white hope, and the money spent on ATSC 3.0 for hundreds of millions of dollars. I guarantee that most of the audience here doesn't know what ATSC 3.0 is. No one knows it exists. It's the world's best kept secret, and it is the great white hope for 120 hertz. It's engineered into ATSC 3.0, and the bandwidth available at ATSC 3.0 supports it, and the deliverable is there. We need an entrepreneur to wake up ATSC 3.0 with 120 hertz. I'll buy the box and I'll click on whatever game they'll sell me at 120. And everybody I know will do the same thing.
So there's the future.
You asked about the future?
That would be fun.
Future. And I'm angry that I don't have it because I've had the misfortune of seeing it.
Oh yeah, that's awful. Once you experience that, it's like it's hard to unsee. It's
HD moments, like going from HD to SD. And that temporal resolution, don't discount temporal resolution. And again, it's not needed in movies at all. It's not part of the design. But in sports, it's life-sustaining air. And once you see it, you'll click on the box and you'll buy it.
All right.
So that's all I got. That's all I've got to say. That's my.
That's it. That's it.
My speaker's calling at the moment.
I asked you guys for an hour and a half. We've gone an hour over that thing, and like everybody's like, I could keep going, but maybe we'll get some more questions. We definitely should do this again, see where this leads to. Hopefully everybody listening, watching got some information that they hadn't had before. I know I did. I got to go look up temporal.
But an ATSC 3.0.
Yeah, exactly. I got a lot of homework to do. But Joel, Andre, John, Joe, thank you very much. This was awesome. And, I mean, a lot of information, a lot of great information. Yeah, Joel, you're the only one that hasn't been on my show before. You and I have to do one. We're going to get into the nitty gritty of where you came from. I know a little bit. We have a mutual friend, Jim. But I'd love the listeners to know a little bit more about you too, because we talk more about just home theater. We're going to talk about how you got into it, like you said.
Just a hobbyist who gave up my day job.
Exactly. So, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for participating in the chat. The chat's been going strong. But yeah, we will do this again. And again, Joel, Andre, Joe, and John, thank you very much. We will be back, Steve and I, later next week. Until then, you know what you got to do.
Go push play. What he said.
That's right. Hey, guys, don't hang up. We're going to talk after this, too. I just got to do the ending here. See how professional I am?
Hey, Fred. This has been a Hey Fred production with theme music by Jeff Bernhardt and Throne Vault Productions.